Hey guys, it's Nemo here again. Just want to say thanks for tuning in. As always, if you enjoy these new dating app horror stories, please hit that like button. And if you're new here, why not subscribe and join the family? And also, just on a side note, all of our stories are original and new to Wide Awake Horror. So you guys can enjoy the newest, scariest, and craziest horror stories there is, from Tinder stories to Snapchat stories to Facebook stories. Now, hope you guys enjoy these ones.
I didn't think anything of it at first, which is probably the worst part looking back. It started like every other dumb late night swipe session when I couldn't sleep and had nothing better to do. I remember I was just laying there scrolling, half paying attention, when her profile popped up. Not even in a dramatic way, just another face in the stack. But I stopped. It wasn't even that she looked unreal or anything like that. She just looked normal in a way that felt rare on those apps. Messy hair in one photo, oversized hoodie in another, sitting on the floor with a coffee cup in one where the lighting was kinda bad. It didn't look staged. It looked real. And yeah, she was pretty, but not in a way that screamed fake profile. I swiped right without thinking much about it. We matched almost instantly. That should have been the first thing that felt off, but it didn't. I just figured she was on her phone at the same time. We started messaging, and it felt easy, like weirdly easy. She didn't take forever to reply, but she also wasn't glued to the chat. The pace felt normal. She didn't ask anything weird either, just basic stuff. What I did for work, what music I liked, dumb little things. I remember feeling like I got lucky for once. After maybe an hour of talking, she asked for my number. I gave it to her. Again, no hesitation. We moved to texting, and that's when things started getting a little strange, but still not enough for me to stop. She started sending photos. Not like anything bad, just random snaps of her day. One of her sitting on her bed with her laptop, another of her holding a mug, one of her shoes kicked off near a couch. Just casual stuff. It felt normal, like she was trying to make it more real than just texting. I sent a couple back too. Nothing special. Just my desk at work, my car, stuff like that. I work late shifts, so most of this was happening while I was at work. I remember checking my phone during a break when she sent the first photo that actually made me pause. It was a picture of a kitchen. At first glance, it didn't even register. Just a counter, a sink, a kettle. Normal. But something about it stuck in my head. I stared at it longer than I needed to. Then I shrugged it off. A lot of kitchens look the same. I even told myself that while I went back to work. We kept talking. She sent another photo maybe 20 minutes later. This one was of a living room, a couch, a coffee table, a tab on the wall. The lighting looked dim, like it was late afternoon or early evening. Again, nothing crazy. But this time I felt it stronger. That weird feeling like I'd seen it before. I zoomed in on the photo. The table had a scratch in the corner. The couch had this small dent in one of the cushions. I had that exact dent in my couch. I remember just staring at my phone, feeling kind of stupid, like I was trying to convince myself of something that wasn't there. I even opened my camera roll and looked at an old photo I had in my living room. It looked similar, but not exactly the same. I told myself I was reaching. I put my phone away and tried to ignore it. Then she sent another one. This time was a hallway. Narrow, with a coat hanging on a hook, a pair of shoes on the floor near the wall. My chest dropped. Those were my shoes. Not just the same kind. Mine, same scuffs on the sides, same worn out laces. I didn't even realize I'd stopped breathing for a second. I just sat there staring at it while everything started clicking together in the worst way. I went back to the kitchen photo. Then the living room. I started noticing things I missed before. The exact pattern on the counter. The small chip on the wall near the tea. Stuff I never paid attention to until that moment. It was my apartment. Every single photo she sent was taken inside my apartment, while I was at work. I remember checking the time. I still had 2 hours left on my shift. My hands felt cold and I couldn't think straight. I wanted to believe there was some explanation that didn't involve someone being inside my place. Maybe old photos. Maybe she used to live there. That was the only thing that made any sense. I asked her about it. I tried to keep it casual, like I wasn't freaking out. Just mentioned the place looked familiar. Waited for her to say something normal, something that would make it all make sense. Her reply came quick. She said she liked my place. I stared at that message for a long time. I didn't respond. My brain was trying to piece together how that was even possible. I hadn't told her my address. I barely told her anything about where I live except the general area. There was no way she could have found my exact apartment from that. Another photo came through. This one made my stomach drop harder than anything before. It was my bedroom. My bed, unmade exactly how I left it that morning. My jacket thrown over the chair. Even my charger hanging off the side of the nightstand. And in the corner of the photo, barely visible, was the edge of a mirror. And in that mirror, there was movement. Not clear, not detailed, just enough to see that someone was there holding the phone. I left work early. Didn't even explain it properly. Just grabbed my stuff and went. The whole drive back felt wrong, like I was heading towards something I didn't want to see. I kept checking my phone at red lights. More photos kept coming. Bathroom, closet, my front door from the inside. The last one before I got there was the worst. It was taken from my bed, facing the door. Like someone was laying where I slept. When I got to my building, everything looked normal. Lights on in other apartments, nothing out of place. I stood outside my door for a minute, just listening. Nothing. No sound at all. I unlocked it slowly. The inside looked exactly how I left it. Nothing moved. Nothing missing. Nothing broken. I checked every room. Empty. Completely empty. My heart was still racing, but at the same time I felt stupid again. Like I just worked myself up over nothing. Maybe it was some kind of trick. Maybe someone had photos from before I moved in. I didn't know. I went to my room last. Everything looked the same as in the photo. I sat on the edge of the bed, trying to calm down. That's when my phone buzzed again. I looked at it. It was another photo from her. My hands started shaking before I even opened it. It was a picture of me, sitting on my bed, taken from behind. I slowly turned my head toward the closet. The door was slightly open, just enough to see darkness inside. I didn't move for what felt like forever. I couldn't. My body just locked up while my brain tried to catch up with what I was seeing. My phone buzzed again. Another photo. This time closer. Closer to me. Like whoever was in there had stepped out. I didn't check the closet. I grabbed my keys and left. Didn't pack anything, didn't turn anything off. I just walked out and kept walking until I was outside again. I never went back in after that. I stayed at a friend's place for a while. Told him a watered-down version of it because saying the whole thing out loud made it sound insane. I reported it, but nothing came of it. No signs of forced entry, no fingerprints they could use, nothing missing. Just photos on my phone that I eventually deleted because I couldn't stand looking at them. Her number stopped working the next day. Profile gone too. Like she never existed. I still don't know how she got in. I changed apartments a month later. New place, new locks, everything. But sometimes when I'm at work late, I still get that feeling. Like if I checked my phone at the wrong moment, there'd be a photo waiting. Taken before I got home.
Hey guys, quick one. Sorry for interrupting. Just want to let you guys know that we've got a new channel coming, and it's an animated channel. Now, I hope you guys are just as excited as we are for this one, and I can't wait to share new details soon. So keep an eye out. For now, enjoy the rest of these stories.
I knew something was off before I'd even met him, but not in a dramatic way. It was more like when you watch a video that looks normal at first, then you replay it and notice something in the background that doesn't match. That kind of off. It started with how weirdly specific he was about the date. Most guys just say something like food or drinks and figure it out later, but he had a full plan laid out like he'd been thinking about it for weeks. Exact time, exact place, he even told me what kind of vibe it would be. He kept saying it would be perfect, like that word mattered more than anything else. I almost didn't go because of that. It felt like too much pressure for a first date, but at the same time I was curious, and he didn't come off creepy in messages. Just overly prepared. He picked this small restaurant I'd never heard of. Not in the main part of town either, kind of tucked away down a side street where you wouldn't go unless you were looking for it. He sent me the address and even told me where to park, which I thought was a bit much but still helpful. I remember sitting in my car for a minute before going in, checking my reflection, and rereading our messages. Everything still seemed normal enough. When I walked in, it felt quiet in a way restaurants usually aren't. Not empty, just controlled. There were people there, a few tables occupied, but nobody was really talking loud or moving around much. Even the music was low, like it was playing just to fill space. The lighting was warm but kind of flat at the same time, like it didn't change depending on where you stood. He was already there, sitting at a table near the middle. He stood upright when I walked in, like he was waiting for that exact second. Not a second earlier, not late. Exactly when I opened the door. That's when the first weird thing happened. He smiled and greeted me, and it sounded normal, but it also felt like something I'd already heard, like I could predict the tone before he even said it. I brushed it off and sat down. The table was already set with menus, glasses of water, everything arranged perfectly. Too perfectly. Like nobody had actually touched anything. We started talking, and at first it felt okay. He was polite, asked about me, laughed at the right times. But after a few minutes, I started noticing something that made my stomach feel weird. I knew what he was going to say before he said it. Not exactly word for word, but close enough that it felt like I'd heard it already, like my brain was slightly ahead of the moment. I thought maybe it was just because he was predictable. Some people just talk in a way that's easy to guess. I tried to ignore it. Then the waiter came over. He didn't introduce himself or anything, just walked up with his calm expression like he'd been it the whole time. And before he spoke, I knew what he was about to ask. Not just that he'd asked for our order. I knew the exact phrasing. And then he said, exactly how I expected. That's when it stopped feeling like a coincidence. I froze for a second, just staring at the table. I didn't want to look at either of them. My heart started beating faster, but I kept trying to act normal because I didn't want to make it awkward over something I couldn't explain. We ordered food, or at least I thought we did. The weird part is, I don't actually remember choosing anything. I remember looking at the menu, but it felt like my eyes just moved over the words without really processing them. And then somehow the order was placed. The conversation kept going, but it started feeling more and more controlled, like there was a pattern to it that I couldn't break out of. Every time I tried to say something different, something off topic, it just didn't come out right. Like my words adjusted themselves halfway through. He kept smiling the same way, nodding at the same points, reacting like he already knew what I was going to say. The food came my way too fast. And it was exactly what I would have picked if I had actually thought about it. That's when I noticed something else. The other tables. I started paying attention to them, really paying attention. It hit me all at once. They were doing the same thing. Not the same conversations, but the same patterns. Someone would laugh at a certain moment, and another table across the room would laugh at almost the exact same timing, like it echoed. People would lift their glasses in sync without looking at each other. It didn't look natural. It looked timed. I felt this heavy pressure in my chest, like I needed to get out, but at the same time, I couldn't just stand up and leave. It felt like something was holding the whole situation together, and if I broke it, something worse would happen. I looked back at him. He was watching me in a way he hadn't before. Not smiling anymore, just waiting. And I knew somehow that this was the part where I was supposed to say something specific. I didn't know what it was, but I could feel it, like a blank space in a script that I was expected to fill. I stayed quiet. His expression changed slightly. Not angry, just off. The waiter came back without being called. Again, I knew he was coming before he moved. He set something down on the table. A dessert I didn't order, but I recognized it. Not from real life. From a dream I had a few nights before. I remember waking up from that dream feeling weird because it felt too detailed, like it had a structure instead of random nonsense. And now it was sitting right in front of me. That's when I realized something that made everything worse. This wasn't just planned. It was rehearsed. Like this exact night had already happened somewhere else before I ever got here. I pushed my chair back. That felt like the first real choice I made since walking in. The sound of it scraping the floor was louder than anything else in the room. Everything else stopped. Not gradually. Instantly. Every table, every movement, every sound. Just silence. I stood up. No one moved. Not the waiter, not the people at the other tables, not him. They were all just still. Looking at me. I didn't say anything. I walked toward the door, and it felt like I was moving through something thick, like the air itself didn't want me to leave. But I kept going. When I reached the door and opened it, the outside noise hit me all at once. Cars, people, normal sounds. It felt so loud compared to inside. I stepped out. And right before the door closed behind me, I looked back. Everything inside was moving again, like nothing had happened. People talking, eating, laughing. But none of them looked at me, except him. He was still sitting there, facing the door, watching me. And his expression looked wrong. Not upset. Not confused. Just I had messed something up that was supposed to go a certain way. I left and didn't look back again. Later that night, I checked the app. His profile was gone. Like it never existed. I even searched the restaurant. No website, no reviews, nothing. I went back to the street the next day just to make sure I wasn't imagining it. The building was there. But it wasn't a restaurant. It was empty. Completely empty inside. No tables, no lights, nothing. Just a blank space. I stood there for a while, trying to make sense of it. Then I noticed something on the inside of the glass. A small sign taped to the door. Just one line. Next time, followed the script. The first time it happened, I thought I just zoned out. Like when we tell the joke you told 100 times and halfway through you forget if you actually said it out loud yet or just thought about saying it. That kind of thing. It felt small, easy to ignore. If it stayed like that, I probably wouldn't even remember her. I matched with her on a random Tuesday night when I couldn't sleep. Nothing special about it. Her profile wasn't over the top, just a few pictures. Normal bio, nothing that screamed fake or perfect. She looked like someone you'd pass on the street and think about later for no reason. We started talking and it was easy right away. Not forced, not dry, just normal. She got my sense of humor quickly, which is rare because most people either don't get it or try too hard to match it. She didn't try. She just laughed at everything I said. And not in a fake way either. It felt real, like she actually found me funny, which made me lean into it more. I started joking more than usual, testing dumb stuff just to see if she'd react the same way. She did. Every single time. It felt good, honestly. Like finally someone was on the same wavelength without me having to explain anything. We met up a few days later. Just a casual thing, nothing big. Coffee place near the edge of town, not too busy. I remember walking in and spotting her right away. She looked exactly like her photos, which already put me at ease. We sat down, started talking, and it picked up right where texting left off. Same vibe, same energy. I told the joke maybe 10 minutes in, something random about how I once tried to fix my own sink and ended up making it worse. Not even that funny, just something to fill the space. She laughed. But then she said the joke back. Exactly the same. Same wording, same timing. I remember just staring at her for a second, confused. I thought maybe she didn't hear me properly and was repeating it back, but it didn't sound like that. It sounded like she was telling it herself. I laughed it off. Didn't think too much about it. The rest of the date went fine. She was easy to talk to, didn't make things awkward, and we stayed longer than I expected. Nothing else weird happened, at least nothing I noticed at the time. When I left, I felt good about it. Like it was one of the better first dates I'd had in a while. We kept talking after that, texting every day. Same pattern. I'd say something, she'd react perfectly. Jokes landed, conversations flowed, nothing felt forced. But after a while, I started noticing something small. She'd sometimes type out things I was about to say. Not full sentences, just parts of them. Like I'd be thinking of a reply, and then my phone would buzz, and it would be exactly that. I told myself it was just predictable conversation. People think alike sometimes. It happens. I didn't question it too much. We planned a second date about a week later. This time it was at a different place, more of a sit-down restaurant. A bit nicer, but still relaxed. I got there first. Sat down, checked my phone, waited. When she walked in, she smiled the same way she did the first time. Same expression, same timing. I noticed it, but again, not enough to make a big deal out of it. We started talking, and that's when it happened again. I went to tell a story. Just something dumb about work, nothing important. But before I could even get past the first sentence, she said it. Word for word. Exactly how I was about to say it. I stopped. Like fully stopped, mid-thought. She finished the whole thing. Every detail. Even the part at the end where I usually change it slightly depending on who I'm talking to. She said that too. I didn't laugh this time. I just stared at her. She smiled like she'd just said something funny. Like it was normal. I felt this weird pressure in my head, like I was trying to catch up to something that had already happened. I tried to test it. I thought of a joke in my head, something specific I hadn't told her before. Before I could say it, she said it. Exact same words. Same pause in the middle. Even the same way I usually mess up the last part and have to correct myself. She copied that too. My stomach dropped. I didn't know what to say after that. So I stayed quiet. And that's when things got worse. She kept talking. But everything she said sounded like something I would say. Not just jokes. Opinions, little comments, the way she described things. It was all me. Just coming out of her instead. I felt like I was listening to a recording of myself I didn't remember making. I tried to interrupt at one point, just to break it. But when I opened my mouth, nothing came out right. Like my brain and my words weren't lining up anymore. She kept going. Calm, steady, like nothing was wrong. People around us didn't react. They just kept eating, talking, doing normal things. It made it feel worse. Like this was only happening to me. I tried one more thing. I thought of something completely random. A sentence that didn't make sense, something I'd never actually say out loud. Before I could stop myself, I started to say it, but she said it first. Perfectly. That's when I realized it wasn't just that she knew what I was going to say. It was like she was getting there before me. Like my thoughts weren't fully mine anymore. Like they were being copied and pushed on ahead of me. I felt stuck. Like if I stayed there any longer, I'd stop having original thoughts completely. Like everything I was about to say or think would already exist somewhere else first. I stood up. This time, I didn't care about being polite or finishing the date properly. She didn't try to stop me. She just watched. With that same expression. Like she knew exactly what I was about to do. I left the restaurant and didn't look back. I walked for a while, not even sure where I was going. Just trying to clear my head. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't want to check it, but I did. It was a message from her. But I didn't open it right away. I already knew what it said. I could feel it in the back of my head, like a sentence forming before I even read it. I unlocked my phone slowly, opened the message, and there it was. Exactly what I expected. Same words. Same punctuation. Like I'd written it myself. I deleted the app that night. Blocked her number. Tried to forget about it. But every now and then, I'll be thinking something random. And for a split second, it feels like it's not the first time that thought existed. Like somewhere just ahead of me, it already got said. I woke up already smiling, which almost never happens. It took me a second to even remember why, but then it hit me all at once. The date. Everything about it. It had gone way better than I expected, like one of those rare times where nothing felt awkward or forced, and you don't replay it in your head cringing at something you said. I just laid there for a bit, staring at the ceiling, going over it again. The place, the walk after, the random stuff we talked about that somehow didn't feel random at all. It felt like I'd known her longer than one night, which sounds dumb, but that's the only way I can explain it. I grabbed my phone, still half asleep, expecting maybe a message from her. Nothing. That was fine. It wasn't even morning yet. I opened the app instead, mostly out of habit, just to look at her profile again, maybe check if she updated anything. But when my profile loaded, something fell off straight away. Not in a big obvious way. Just different. At first I thought it was a glitch. Like the layout looked slightly changed or something updated overnight, but then I started reading. And my stomach dropped. My bio wasn't mine anymore. It still had parts I recognized, of the first line I wrote months ago. But after that, it kept going. Paragraphs I didn't write. Details about me that were way too specific. It mentioned a trip to a lake I didn't remember going on. It described how I apparently hated the sound of metal scraping plates, which I had never even thought about before reading it, but now that it was there, it felt weirdly true. There were things about my childhood in there too. Small stuff, like a teacher's name for primary school, a street I used to walk down. Stuff I hadn't thought about in years. Stuff I never put on any dating profile. I sat up in bed, fully awake now, scrolling through it slower. It wasn't just the bio. My interests were updated too. Movies I'd never seen were listed as my favorites. Songs I didn't recognize. Even my job description was slightly different. Not completely wrong, but detailed in a way I'd never written it. Like someone else described my life better than I could. I checked my photos next. That's where it got worse. There were new ones, mixed in with my old ones like they'd always been there. Pictures of me in places I didn't remember going. One of me sitting by a lake at sunset. One of me leaning against a wall in what looked like a city I couldn't place. They weren't blurry or fake looking either. They looked real. Like someone took them at the time. I zoomed in on one of them, trying to find something off. Nothing. The lighting, the shadows, everything matched. It was me, wearing clothes I owned. Standing somewhere I couldn't remember being. My heart started racing, but at the same time, part of me was trying to make sense of it in a normal way. Maybe I just forgot. Maybe these were old photos. But that didn't explain the bio, or the details, or how it all updated overnight. I checked the last edited timestamp. It said it was updated a few minutes ago, while I was asleep. I locked my phone and just sat there for a second, trying to think straight. Then I unlocked it again and went back to the app. I opened her profile. It looked the same as before. Same photos, same bio. But something about it felt different now. Like I was seeing it from a slightly different angle. I started reading her bio again, more carefully this time. And that's when I noticed it. Small details that matched mine. Not obvious stuff, but specific things. Like the way she described a memory about getting lost as a kid. It was similar to one that was now on my profile. Not identical, but close enough that it felt connected. I scrolled through her photos. There was one of her by a lake, the same lake from my new photo. Same background, same lighting, just taken from a different angle. My chest tightened. I went back to our messages. I started reading them from the beginning, and at first it all looked normal. But the more I read, the more I noticed things I didn't remember typing. My messages were there, but some of them felt unfamiliar. Like I knew they were mine, but I couldn't remember actually writing them. There were parts where I talked about things that were now in my bio. Memories, places, details. It was like I already told her all of it, even though I had no memory of doing that. I kept scrolling. My hands started shaking a bit. There were entire sections of conversation that felt new to me, like I was reading someone else's chat using my account. But it was my number, my profile, my words. I got up and started pacing around my room, trying to clear my head. I kept telling myself there had to be a logical explanation. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe my memory was messing with me. But that didn't explain the photos. I opened my gallery. The new photos weren't there. Only on the app. I tried to download one. It saved to my phone like a normal picture. I opened it. Still looked completely real. I checked the details. No location data. No timestamp. Just blank. Like it didn't have a past. My phone buzzed. I almost dropped it. It was a notification from the app. Someone liked my profile. I ignored it and went back to her chat. I typed out a message, asking about the date, about the photos, about everything. Before I sent it, I hesitated, because something in the back of my head already knew what the reply would be. I sent it anyway. The reply came almost instantly, and when I opened it, my stomach dropped again. It didn't answer my questions. It continued a conversation I didn't remember starting, like we were already in the middle of something. It referenced things from last night. Details about places we went after the restaurant. Things we supposedly did. None of it matched what I remembered. I remember dinner. I remember walking a bit after, and then going home. That was it. But according to the messages, the night went on way longer. There were parts about going somewhere else. About talking in her car. About stopping at that lake. The same lake in the photos. I sat back down slowly, trying to piece it together. Either I was losing chunks of memory or something else was filling them in. and neither option made sense. I went back to my profile one more time and scrolled to the bottom. There was a new section I hadn't noticed before. A prompt answer. Something like a fun fact. I definitely didn't write it. It said I was open to new memories. That line stuck in my head. I didn't know why, but it felt important. Like it wasn't just a random addition. My phone buzzed again. Another message from her. I didn't open it right away, because now I wasn't sure if I wanted to know what version of last night was going to continue. I looked around my room. Everything felt normal, but at the same time, it didn't. Like there were gaps I couldn't see. I finally opened the message. It had a photo. Me and her, standing together by the lake, both smiling. I don't remember it being taken, but I remember the feeling in it, like it actually happened. I locked my phone and just sat there, not moving, not thinking, just trying to hold on to what I knew was real, because it felt like if I let it slip even a little, the version in the app would take over completely. My phone buzzed again on the bed next to me. I didn't check it. I already knew it would be something I didn't remember. The first time I saw the photo, I thought it was a joke someone made using my pictures. Like one of those fake couple edits people do when they're bored. I almost laughed when I saw it because it looked convincing at first glance, but the more I stared at it, the less funny it got. It was me, standing next to her, both of us smiling like we'd known each other for a while. And the worst part was, it looked completely normal. Not edited, not stitched together, not anything like that. The lighting matched, the shadows matched, even the way my arm was positioned looked natural, like I'd actually been there. But I hadn't. I hadn't even met her yet. I matched with her 2 days before that. Her profile stood out because it was almost empty. Barely any photos, no linked accounts, nothing flashy. Her bio was just a couple lines about how she didn't like social media and preferred real conversations. That's what made me swipe. It felt different from everyone else trying too hard. We started talking, and she actually stuck to that. She didn't bring up followers or apps or anything like that. If anything, she seemed almost annoyed by it. She said she didn't post much and didn't really care about that stuff. So seeing that photo made no sense. I found it by accident. One of my friends sent me a screenshot late at night, asking if I had a girlfriend I forgot to mention. I opened it expecting something dumb, but then I saw it. Her account. Public. And right at the top was that photo. The caption made it worse. It described a day we hadn't had yet. Walking through a part of town I recognized, grabbing food from a place I go to sometimes, sitting somewhere with a view. It was detailed. Too detailed. Like it was written after the fact, not made up. I went straight to her profile from the app. She hadn't mentioned it at all. Our messages were still normal, talking about meeting up later that week. Nothing weird. I clicked on her social account again. There were more photos. Not just that one. A few others. All of us together, in different places. One of us sitting outside a cafe. One of us walking down a street at night. One where I was looking at her instead of the camera, like someone caught a moment. I checked the dates. They were all posted earlier that day, before I even woke up. I felt this weird mix of confusion and something heavier I couldn't explain. Like my brain was trying to reject what I was seeing, but couldn't find a reason to. I opened one of the photos and zoomed in. It wasn't just me standing there. It was me doing specific things. In one of them, I was holding a drink I always order. In another, I was wearing a jacket I actually own. Even the way my hair looked was accurate for that day. It wasn't random. It matched real details. I went back to our chat. Nothing about any of this. No mention of photos. No hint that she even used social media. I asked her about it. Kept it simple. Tried not to sound like I was freaking out. She replied after a few minutes. And what she said didn't help. She didn't deny it. She just said she doesn't really use it much. Like that explained anything. I stared at my phone for a while after that. Then I did something I probably shouldn't have done. I kept scrolling her account. Older posts. That's when it got worse. There were photos of her with other guys. Same style. Same kind of captions. Like full days documented. But something about them felt off. I clicked into one. The guy looked normal, but when I looked closer, his face felt wrong. Not distorted, just slightly off in a way I couldn't place. Like it was close to real but not fully there. I went to another post. Different guy. Same feeling. And then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. In the background of one of those photos, there was a place I recognized. Not from her posts. From real life. A spot near where I live. Not common landmark either. Just a random street corner. I checked the date on that post. It was from weeks ago. Before I even matched with her. I went back to our messages again. Read through everything more carefully this time. Looking for anything I missed. There were small things. Tiny details she mentioned about places she liked. They matched the photos. But at the time, they didn't stand out. Now they did. It felt like she already had a timeline. Like everything was planned before I was even part of it. My phone buzzed. Another message from her. This time, she sent a photo. Not from her account. Directly to me. It was another picture of us. Different from the ones I'd seen. This one looked like it was taken indoors. Maybe an apartment. I was sitting on a couch. She was next to me. Both of us looking at something off camera. It looked casual. Real. Like it wasn't posed. I dropped my phone on the bed for a second. Just stared at it. Then picked it up again. Zoomed in. Everything looked consistent. No signs of editing. No weird edges. Nothing. I checked the background. I recognized the room. Not exactly, but it looked like a layout similar to my place. That made my chest tighten. I stood up and looked around my room. Everything was normal. But now I couldn't stop comparing it to the photo. Trying to find matches. Angles. Details. My phone buzzed again. Another message. Another photo. This one was outside. Same street as one of her posts. Me walking next to her. Mid-step. Like it was taken without me noticing. I started feeling like I was falling behind something. Like there was a version of events happening somewhere that I wasn't part of yet. And somehow it was already documented. I checked the time. It wasn't even the day we were supposed to meet yet. That's when I looked back at the captions on our posts. The one from earlier. The one describing the day we hadn't had. I read it again. Slower this time. And I realized something. It wasn't just describing random things. It was describing a plan. Specific places. Specific order. Like a schedule. I opened my Maps app. Looked at the locations she mentioned. They were all real. And all close enough to actually do in one day. My heart started racing again, but this time it felt different. Less confusion. More like I understood what was going on, just not how. It felt like she already knew how the day would go. Like it already happened somewhere. And the photos were proof of that version. My phone buzzed again. I didn't want to open it, but I did. Another message. No text. Just a photo. This one was taken at night. The last place mentioned in her caption. Me standing under a streetlight. Looking straight at the camera. My expression looked tired. Like it was the end of a long day. I stared at it for a long time. Because something about it felt different from the others. It didn't feel like a happy photo. It felt like the end of something. I checked the timestamp. Posted a few minutes ago. I hadn't even met her yet. I closed the app. Sat there for a while. Then I opened our chat again. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I didn't know what to say. Because it felt like anything I typed was already part of that timeline somewhere. I locked my phone instead. Set it down. And just sat there. Trying to decide if I should still meet her. Because part of me felt like I didn't have a choice. Like that day was already set. Already posted. Already real somewhere. My phone buzzed one more time. I didn't check it. I already knew it would be another photo. Probably one I hadn't lived yet. I knew the date was going bad before anything actually happened. Not because of him, but because of this weird feeling I had the whole time, like I was slightly out of place, like I showed up 10 minutes late to something I was supposed to understand already. Everything looked normal though. Restaurant was busy, lights were low, people talking around us. Nothing strange on the surface. He seemed normal too. Polite, a bit quiet, but not awkward, just calm. We sat down, started talking, and for the first few minutes it felt fine. Nothing amazing, but not bad either. I remember thinking it might just be one of those average dates you forget about the next day. Then his phone buzzed. He didn't check it at first, just glanced at it and left it on the table. I didn't think anything of it. A minute later, it buzzed again. This time he picked it up. His expression changed slightly. Not shocked, just confused. He looked at me for a second, like he was about to say something, then didn't. Just put the phone back down. We kept talking. Or tried to. Because after that, his focus kept drifting. His eyes kept flicking to the phone every few seconds, like he was waiting for it to go off again. And it did. Buzz. This time, he picked it up straight away. Looked at it longer. His face tightened a bit. Then he turned the phone slightly away from me, like he didn't want me to see the screen. That's when I started feeling uncomfortable. Not because of the phone itself, but because of how he was reacting to it. It didn't feel like normal notifications. It felt like something was building. I asked if everything was okay. He nodded, but it didn't look convincing. He didn't explain anything. Just said it was nothing and tried to move on. But the phone kept buzzing. Over and over. Each time he'd look at it faster. Each time his reaction got worse. More tense. More distracted. I started paying attention to the timing. It wasn't random. It was consistent. Like messages being sent one after another without stopping. That's when he finally turned the phone toward me. Just for a second. Like he wanted to show me but also didn't. I only saw it briefly. But it was enough. The messages were from me. My name at the top. My contact photo. And a list of texts underneath. I felt this drop in my chest that didn't make sense at first. Because I hadn't sent anything. My phone was sitting right next to me on the table. Screen off. No notifications. Nothing. He turned it back quickly like he regretted showing me. But it was too late. I knew what I saw. I grabbed my phone. Checked it. No messages sent. No drafts. No anything. Our chat was empty since earlier that day. I looked back at him. He was already staring at the screen again. Another buzz. This time I leaned slightly to see more. He didn't stop me. Maybe he wanted me to see. The messages were real. And they were getting worse. The first ones looked normal. Just simple stuff. Asking where he was. Asking if he was still coming. Things that could have been sent earlier. But then they changed. They got more urgent. Like I was trying to reach him and he wasn't replying. I scrolled mentally through my day, trying to figure out if I'd somehow sent them without remembering. But that made no sense. I was with him. Sitting right there. Another buzz. He opened it again. This time, he didn't hide it. I saw the latest message clearly. It was from me. But it didn't sound like something I would ever send. It sounded desperate. Not in a normal way. More like someone panicking. My hands started shaking slightly. I checked my own phone again. Still nothing. I even refreshed the chat. No new messages. But his phone kept getting them. One after another. I started noticing the timestamps. They were current. Coming and live. Not delayed. Not of old. Happening right now. I felt this weird disconnect. Like there were two versions of me. One sitting at the table. And one somewhere else. Sending those messages. I asked him to let me see properly. He hesitated, then handed me the phone. I looked at the screen. It was my number. My name. Everything matched. But the conversation wasn't mine. I started reading from the top. The first few messages were normal. Then they slowly changed. Asking why he wasn't answering. Asking if he was ignoring me. Then saying things that didn't make sense. About being somewhere dark. About not being able to find him. My breathing got heavier. Because the tone kept shifting. Getting worse. Like whoever was sending them was getting more desperate by the minute. I scrolled down. The latest messages were the worst. They sounded scared. Like something was wrong. Like I was in trouble. But I was right there. Perfectly fine. sitting in a restaurant, holding his phone. I handed it back slowly. Neither of us knew what to say. The phone buzzed again. He didn't even look at it this time, just left it on the table, face up. Another message appeared. I saw it pop up on the screen. Same contact. Same name. Another line of text. I didn't want to read it, but I did anyway. It mentioned the restaurant, described it, the lighting, the tables, exactly how it looked. My stomach dropped, because that meant whoever was sending those messages knew where we were. I looked around. Everyone seemed normal. Talking, eating, nothing out of place. But now it didn't feel normal anymore. It felt like we were being watched. My phone buzzed. I jumped. Looked at it. Nothing. No new messages. No notifications. Completely silent. But his phone buzzed again. Another message. This one was different. Short. Like it didn't have time to say much. I felt this pressure building in my chest. Like something was about to connect in a way I didn't want. I reached for his phone again. Looked at the latest message. And for a second, I couldn't process it. Because it didn't fit. It wasn't just desperate. It was describing something happening. Something physical. Something close. I looked up from the screen. Slowly. And that's when I noticed something behind him. At the far end of the restaurant. Someone standing near the entrance, wearing the same jacket as me. Same hair. Same build. Just standing there, facing our table. I couldn't see the face clearly from that distance, but I didn't need to. I already knew. My hands went cold. I looked back at the phone. Another message came through. This time, I didn't need to read it fully. Just the first few words were enough. It matched exactly what I was seeing. I looked up again. The figure hadn't moved. Still standing there. Still facing us. The room felt smaller suddenly, like everything was closing in. I pushed my chair back. Stood up. My legs felt unsteady, but I forced myself to move. He stood up too, like he didn't want to be left sitting there. We didn't say anything. We just walked toward the exit. Past the tables. Past the people. Everything felt too quiet, like the sound was muted. As we got closer to the door, the figure was still there. Not moving. Not reacting. Just waiting. My heart was pounding so loud I could barely think. I stopped a few steps away, because something felt wrong. Not just the situation. The way it was happening. Like we were walking into something already set. His phone buzzed again. Loud. Clear. I didn't look at it this time. I didn't want to see what it said. I didn't want to know if it matched what was about to happen. I turned around instead. Walked back the way we came. Fast. Didn't stop. Didn't look back. I heard him following behind me. We left through the side exit. Out into the street. The noise came back all at once. Cars, people, everything normal again. I didn't stop walking until I was a block away. Then I finally looked at my phone. Still nothing. No messages. No missed calls. Like none of it happened. I checked his phone one last time. The conversation was gone. Completely empty. No messages. No history. Just my name at the top. We didn't talk after that. Didn't message. Didn't try to explain it. I went home and turned my phone off. Sat there for a long time in silence, because I couldn't stop thinking about those messages. How they started normal, and slowly turned into something else. Something worse. Like a version of me was somewhere else entirely, trying to reach him, and getting more desperate when it couldn't. I still think about that last message, the one I didn't read, because part of me feels like it said exactly what was about to happen next, and I just chose not to see it. I didn't even notice her the first time, which is what bothers me the most now. It means she was already there and I just didn't see it. It wasn't until the third or fourth time that something clicked, and by then it was already too late to pretend it was nothing. This all started because I ghosted her. Not in a dramatic way, No argument, no weird ending. I just stopped replying. The conversation had slowed down. I lost interest. And instead of explaining that like a normal person, I just left it. She didn't blow up my phone or anything either. Just sent a couple follow-ups over a few days and then stopped. It felt like it ended clean, which made it easier to forget about. And I did forget about her. For a while. The first time I saw her again was in a photo my friend posted. It was just a random group picture from a night out. Nothing important. I wasn't even in it, just scrolling through stories out of boredom. I tapped through without paying much attention. Then I went back. Not because of her. Just because something in the background caught my eye. I paused on the photo. Looked closer. There was a girl standing behind the group, slightly off to the side. Not part of the picture, just there in the background. And she looked familiar. I zoomed in. It took me a second, but then I recognized her. It was the girl I ghosted. Same hair, same face, same expression. Just standing there. I felt this weird jolt, but I laughed it off almost immediately. It wasn't that crazy. People end up in the same places all the time. Same city, same spots. It happens. I checked the location tag on the story. It was a bar I'd been to before, but not recently. So yeah, it made sense. I'd moved on. Didn't think about it again. Until a few days later. I was scrolling through a random account I follow. Someone I barely know, just added because we had mutuals. They posted a photo at a coffee shop. Again, nothing special. But this time I saw her instantly. In the background. Sitting at a table behind the person taking the picture. Not looking at the camera. Just there. My stomach dropped a little this time. Because this wasn't the same place as before. Completely different part of town. Different day. Different person posting. But she was still there. I checked the date. Posted that morning. I hadn't been anywhere near that area. So it wasn't like she was following me physically. At least that's what I told myself. I zoomed in again. Same face. Same neutral expression. Like she wasn't reacting to anything. Just existing in the background. I clicked off the photo and just sat there for a second, trying to figure out why it felt so wrong. Because logically, it could still be coincidence. Maybe she just went out a lot. Maybe she ended up in the background of people's photos more than usual. It wasn't impossible, but it didn't feel like coincidence. Not anymore. I went back to her profile. It was still there. Same as before. No new posts. No signs that she was doing anything out of the ordinary. If anything, it looked inactive. That made it worse somehow. Because if she wasn't posting, then how was she showing up everywhere else? I tried to ignore it again. Told myself I was overthinking. But then it happened a third time. This one hit harder. Because it was closer. The photo was posted by someone I work with. A picture from outside the office building. Taken during lunch. I wasn't in it, but I recognized the spot immediately. I zoomed in without even thinking. And there she was. Standing across the street. Facing the camera. This time she was looking directly at it. And I swear, it looked like she was smiling slightly. Not a normal smile. Just enough to notice. My chest felt tight. Because now it wasn't random locations anymore. This was near me. Near where I actually go every day. I checked the timestamp. It was from earlier that day. I tried to remember where I was at that time. I had been inside. Working. I didn't see her. But she was there. Close enough to be in that photo. I started going through more posts. Not just from people I know, but random ones too. Searching location tags, scrolling through recent uploads. And once I started looking, I couldn't stop seeing her. Not in every photo, but enough. A park. A street. A store. Always in the background. Always somewhere behind the main subject. And each time, she was closer. Not just physically, but closer to me. Places I go more often. Places I recognized instantly. It felt like a pattern. Like she was moving through these photos step by step. Getting nearer. I stopped going out as much after that. Started staying home more. Because I didn't want to see her in the background of something taken right outside my building. But that didn't help. Because the next time I saw her, it was worse than all the others. It was in a photo I took. I didn't notice it right away. I had taken a picture of my room to send to a friend, just something random, nothing important. After I sent it, I opened it again to check something, and that's when I saw it, in the reflection of my window. Faint, but clear enough. Her, standing outside, looking in. I dropped my phone. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely think. I went straight to the window, looked outside. Nothing, just the street, empty. I went back to the photo, zoomed in. She was still there. Same face, same expression, closer than ever. I checked the time. I had taken that photo seconds before noticing, which meant she had been there, right outside, close enough to be in the reflection. But when I looked, she was gone. I stopped sleeping properly after that. Kept checking every photo I saw online, looking for her, and she kept appearing, closer each time, until it got to the point where I didn't need to search anymore, because she showed up in something else. A live video, someone streaming from a street near mine. I clicked on it without thinking, watched for a few seconds. Normal stuff, people walking by, cars passing. And then I saw her, walking in the background, not standing still this time, moving toward the camera, toward wherever the person was filming. I closed the app instantly. My hands were shaking, because now it wasn't just photos. It was real time. I didn't open anything for hours after that. Just sat there, trying to convince myself it wasn't what I thought. But deep down I knew. This wasn't random. This wasn't coincidence. It was something else. Something that started the moment I ignored her. My phone buzzed later that night. I didn't want to check it, but I did anyway. It was a notification. Someone had tagged me in a photo. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. When I finally did, I felt that same drop in my chest. Because this time, she wasn't in the background. She was right behind me. Close enough that if I had turned around, I would have seen her. But I didn't remember that moment at all. I don't remember anyone being there. I just remember taking that photo earlier that day. Alone. I almost unmatched him before we even talked properly, which is the part that keeps replaying in my head. Like if I had just done that one small thing differently, none of this would have happened. His profile wasn't normal. Not in a fake or obvious way, just off. His bio was short, but it had one line that stuck out. Something about not wasting time because he already knew how things went. I remember rolling my eyes at it. It sounded like one of those try-hard lines people use to seem interesting. But I still swiped. We matched a few minutes later. He messaged first, and it wasn't weird at all. Just normal stuff. Asking about my day, what I was into. Nothing that matched that strange line in his bio. So I ignored it. We talked for a while, and honestly, he seemed fine. Maybe even better than most people I'd matched with. He didn't try too hard, didn't send anything awkward, just kept things steady. If anything, he felt a bit too calm. Like nothing surprised him. After a day or two, he brought it up. Not directly, just hinted at it. Said something about how he already knew how our conversation would go. I thought he was joking. I made some comment about that, expecting him to drop it. But he didn't. He doubled down on it. Said he wasn't guessing. Said he already saw it happen. That's when I started getting a bit uncomfortable. Not scared, just annoyed. It felt like he was trying to set up some kind of angle. Like he was going to reveal it was all a joke or something. I told him to prove it. I didn't expect anything serious. Just thought he'd back off or say something vague. Instead, he sent a screenshot. I opened it, and for a second, I didn't understand what I was looking at. It was a chat. Our chat. Same names, same layout, everything. But the messages were different. It went further than where we were. Like a continuation. I scrolled through it slowly. My messages were there. Things I hadn't typed yet. Replies to things he hadn't said yet. It looked real. Too real. Same typing style, same way I phrase things. Even small habits, like how I shortened certain words. It all matched. I felt this weird drop in my stomach, but I still tried to explain it away. Maybe he edited it. Maybe it was fake. It had to be. I told him that. He sent another one. This time, it was shorter. Just a few lines. But they were things I was about to say. Like, exactly. I hadn't typed them yet, but they were already there. I stared at my keyboard. The words in my head matched what was in the screenshot. I didn't send them. I typed something completely different. Something random. Sent it. He replied immediately, and then sent another screenshot. Updated, including the message I had just sent, but also including what I was about to say next. My chest felt tight, because now it wasn't just prediction. It was ahead of me, like my thoughts were already recorded somewhere before I acted on them. I stopped replying for a while. Just sat there, staring at the screenshots, trying to find something off. Anything that proved it wasn't real, but I couldn't. Everything lined up too perfectly. He messaged again, said he could show me more. I didn't want to see more, but I also couldn't stop. So I agreed. He sent a longer screenshot this time, way further ahead. I scrolled through it slowly. My messages kept going. Normal at first, talking about meeting up, planning a date. Then it shifted. The tone changed. My messages got shorter, more urgent, asking him questions, asking if he was serious, asking what was going on. I felt my breathing get heavier, because it felt like I was reading something I would actually write if I was in that situation. Then I reached the part that made my hands start shaking. My messages turned into something else. Not just confused, desperate, asking for help, over and over, like I was stuck somewhere, like something was wrong. I stopped scrolling, closed the screenshot. I didn't want to see the rest. My phone felt heavy in my hand, like it wasn't just a device anymore, like it was showing me something I wasn't supposed to see yet. He messaged again, asking if I understood now. I didn't reply, because I didn't. Not really. I just knew it wasn't normal. I tried to think logically. Maybe he had access to my account somehow. Maybe he was manipulating things, but that didn't explain how he knew what I was going to type before I typed it. I decided to test it again. I thought of something completely random. A sentence I would never actually send. I typed it out, looked at it, then deleted it. Didn't send. He sent another screenshot. It showed the message, even though I never sent it. My heart started racing, because now there was no way to explain it normally. It wasn't about the app. It wasn't about hacking. It was something else. Something ahead of me. I asked him what happens next. He didn't answer directly, just sent another screenshot. This one was further than all the others. I hesitated before opening it, but I did anyway. My messages were there again, but they weren't normal. They were broken, short, repeated, like I was panicking, asking where I was, asking how to get out, asking him to help me. Over and over, I felt this heavy pressure in my chest, because it didn't feel like fiction. It felt like something I would actually do if I was in trouble. I scrolled further. There was one message that stood out, longer than the others, more clear. Like I had a moment to type properly. It was me begging him for help, not in a casual way, in a way that felt real. Like I believed he was the only one who could do anything. I stopped reading, locked my phone, just sat there, trying to process it. Because if that was real, then it meant something was going to happen. Something bad enough that I'd end up like that. And somehow he already knew. My phone buzzed. I flinched. It was him again. Another message. I didn't open it right away, because now every message felt like it was pulling me closer to that version of things. I finally opened it. It was simple. He said it hadn't happened yet, but it would, and that he could change it. I stared at the screen for a long time, because part of me wanted to believe him, wanted to think there was a way to avoid whatever that was. But another part of me kept thinking about those screenshots, about how everything lined up perfectly, about how I couldn't change what I was about to type earlier, like it was already decided. I looked at the time, then back at the screenshots, trying to figure out how far ahead they were, trying to see how much time I had. My phone buzzed again. I didn't need to check it. I already knew what it would be. Another piece of something that hadn't happened yet. Another step closer to that message. The one where I'm asking him for help. I haven't sent it yet. But after seeing it, it feels like I already have. I didn't notice it straight away, which sounds stupid now because it's such an obvious thing. But that's how it started. Everything felt normal enough that my brain just skipped over it, like it didn't matter. It wasn't until halfway through the date that it really hit me, and once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. I matched with her on a random afternoon when I was bored. Nothing special about her profile at first glance. A few photos, simple bio, nothing that stood out too much. She looked calm, kind of serious, but not in a bad way. We talked a bit, and she was easy to message. Not overly excited, not dry either. Just steady. She didn't use a lot of emojis or anything like that, just straight messages that actually made sense. We agreed to meet that same evening. The place was this small restaurant just outside the busy part of town. Not fancy, but nice enough. Dim lighting, quiet music, the kind of place where people go when they want something low-key. I got there first. Sat down, checked my phone, and waited. When she walked in, I recognized her immediately. Same as her photos. Same expression, too. That's something I remember clearly now. Her expression didn't really change much when she saw me. Just a slight shift, like she adjusted it instead of reacting naturally. I stood up, we greeted each other, and sat down. Everything felt normal at the start. We talked about basic stuff. Work, where we live, things like that. She answered everything, asked questions back, didn't make it awkward. But there was something about the way she looked at me. Like she was focused in a way that felt too constant. I didn't think much of it at first. Just figured she was paying attention. Then the waiter came over, took our order, and left. And that's when I noticed it. Her eyes. She hadn't blinked. Not once. I tried to ignore it. Told myself I probably just missed it. People blink all the time. You don't notice it unless you're looking for it. So I stopped looking. But then I started noticing other things. The way she held eye contact. It didn't break. Not naturally. Even when I looked away and back, her eyes were already on me. Same position. Same focus. Like she hadn't moved at all. I started paying attention again. Counting in my head without meaning to. Waiting for her to blink. She didn't. Minutes went by. Still nothing. My chest started feeling tight, but I kept talking like everything was fine. Because what was I supposed to say? Hey, you haven't blinked in 5 minutes. That sounds insane. The food came. We started eating. Or at least I did. She picked at hers, small movements, slow. But her eyes stayed on me. Even when she lifted her fork. Even when she looked down for a second. It wasn't a full break. Just a slight tilt. Then straight back to me. I started testing it without making it obvious. Looking at different things around the room. Then quickly back at her. Every time her eyes were already there. Like they never left. I tried to catch the moment she blinked. But it never came. It got to the point where it was all I could think about. The conversation started slipping. I couldn't focus on what she was saying anymore. Just her eyes. Dry. Wide. Unmoving. And the weirdest part was, they didn't look strained. No redness. No watering. Nothing. Just normal. Like blinking wasn't something she needed to do. I started feeling like I needed to blink more just to make up for it. Like my own eyes were overworking. I laughed at something she said, but it felt forced. Because all I could think was how long it had been. 10 minutes. Maybe more. No blink. I looked around the restaurant, trying to ground myself. People were eating, talking normal. Waiter moving between tables. Everything was fine. So I told myself I was just overthinking. But then I looked back at her, and it was the same. Unchanged. That's when I started feeling uncomfortable for real. Not just weirded out. Like something was actually wrong. I finished my food quicker than usual. Just wanted the date to end. She didn't rush. Just kept that same steady pace. Same eye contact. No blinking. When the bill came, I paid without thinking about it. Just wanted to leave. We walked out together. Stood outside for a moment. Street lights on, people passing by, normal night. She looked at me the same way out there. Same unbroken stare. I said something about getting home. She nodded. Slight movement. No change in her eyes. Then she turned and walked away. I watched her go for a second. Then turned and went the other direction. The moment I was out of sight, I felt like I could breathe properly again. Like something lifted. I went home and tried to forget about it. Told myself it was just a weird date. People have strange habits. That was it. But it didn't sit right. Especially the blinking. So the next day, I decided to go back to the restaurant. Not for anything big. Just to check something. I walked in, same place, same setup. It looked exactly the same. I sat down at the same table. The waiter from last night came over. Recognized me. I asked him about the night before. Kept it casual. Mentioned I was there with someone. He looked confused. Said he remembered me. But not anyone with me. I laughed it off, thinking he just forgot. But then he said something that made my stomach drop. He said I was sitting alone the whole time. I felt this cold feeling in my chest. I told him that wasn't possible. That we ordered 2 meals. He shook his head. Said I only ordered 1. I didn't know what to say after that. I looked around the restaurant, trying to find something that proved he was wrong. But everything felt off now. Like I was remembering it differently than it actually happened. I asked about the bill. He said I paid for 1. Just me. I left after that. Went home and checked my bank app. He was right. 1 meal. 1 charge. I sat there for a long time, trying to piece it together. Because I remembered everything clearly. Her sitting across from me. Her talking. Her eating. Her not blinking. But according to everyone else, she wasn't there. I opened the app where we matched. Her profile was gone. No chat. No trace. Like it never existed. I went to my photos. I didn't take any pictures that night. So nothing there. Just my memory. I tried to think back to the moment she walked in. What exactly happened? And that's when something hit me. Something small. But it made everything worse. I couldn't remember her blinking even once. Not just during dinner. But at all. Not when she walked in. Not when we sat down. Not when she left. Nothing. And now when I think about it properly, it feels like she was always looking at me. Even in moments where she shouldn't have been. Like her eyes were fixed on me the entire time. My phone buzzed later that night. I almost ignored it. But I checked anyway. Unknown number. No name. Just a message. I opened it. It was a photo. Dark. Hard to make out at first. Then I saw it. A table. Same table from the restaurant. And me. Sitting there. Alone. Looking straight ahead. And across from me there was nothing. Just an empty chair. But something about the angle felt wrong. Like the photo was taken from exactly where she was sitting. I stared at it for a long time. Then zoomed in. And in the reflection on the glass behind me, faint but clear enough, I saw her. Sitting there. Looking at me. Eyes wide open. I didn't even think twice at first. We matched online, chatted a bit, and then he invited me over. It seemed normal. His messages were chill, funny, smart in a casual way. He wasn't pushy, just someone who seemed genuinely interested. I read the messages while I was sitting on my bed, thinking maybe this could be a cool night out or well in. He lived in this old building on the edge of town, the kind of place where the hallway smelled like stale carpet and old smoke, the kind that makes you pull your hoodie tighter even in the spring. The elevator creaked like it had been there since forever. I pressed the button and told myself to relax, like it wasn't a big deal. First dates at apartments are weird, sure, but maybe this would just be one of those chill nights where we talked and laughed, and I left before midnight. He buzzed me in. The door opened, smelled faintly like coffee and something floral. Not bad, just strong. I stepped inside, and that's when the first thing hit me, the walls. Every inch of his apartment had photos. Hundreds of them. At first glance, I thought they were random people. Maybe friends, family, something like that. But then my eyes caught the faces. They were all me. Different angles, different clothes, different expressions, different lighting. Some were smiling, some crying, some just blank, staring straight into the camera. I blinked, thinking maybe my brain was messing with me. Maybe the lighting or the arrangement made it look like me. But no, it was me. And then I noticed the dates. They weren't past dates. They were all in the future. Some were next week, some were months ahead, even a couple of years from now. Some of them showed me with cuts on my arms, bruises on my face, tears rolling down my cheeks. Others were just casual, me eating a slice of pizza, me walking down a street, me holding a coffee cup. All labeled with precise dates, future dates. My chest started tightening, but I forced a laugh, like maybe it was some weird art project or a creepy joke. He smiled at me from the other side of the room. Looked calm, casual, normal. I tried to say something, my voice stuck in my throat. He just waved me over like everything was fine. The way he moved, it was slow, deliberate, like he had been expecting me. Maybe he had. Maybe he always did. I walked through the apartment, trying to look anywhere but the walls. Every picture I passed, my stomach sank deeper. Some of them were close-ups, so detailed I could see every eyelash, every freckle, every tiny scar. Some had backgrounds I recognized vaguely, streets I'd walked down, coffee shops I'd been to, parks I'd jogged in. It was like he'd been following me for years. My mind was spinning. I asked myself questions. How does he even know what I'll be wearing? How does he know what I'll be doing in 6 months? Why are some of them? Hurt me. He poured us both a drink. Nothing fancy, just soda. He smiled, said something about wanting to make sure I was comfortable. I nodded, but I couldn't focus on him. All I could see were the walls, all me, all future me. Then I noticed the smallest detail. On one of the pictures, the timestamp was tonight. The photo was of me, taken right before I even got there. I froze. How was that even possible? I had just walked in. He moved closer. I stepped back, tripping slightly over the edge of a rug. He didn't react, didn't flinch, just kept looking at me, calm, steady. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. I wanted to run, but my legs felt glued to the floor. Then I noticed the camera, hidden, tiny, tucked into the corner of the ceiling. I had seen it before, but I had brushed it off as a smoke detector or some weird ceiling thing. It wasn't. Lens pointed straight at me. My stomach dropped. I understood then. He wasn't just some guy who liked photography. He had been watching me, following me, documenting me, predicting me, everything. Every move I thought was private, every quiet moment, every tear, every smile, everything would eventually end up on those walls. Dated, labeled, planned. I wanted to leave, wanted to rip the door open and just get out of there. But the more I tried to move, the heavier the floor felt. I told myself it was panic, my brain exaggerating, but the feeling didn't go away. He started talking, calm voice, like nothing was wrong. He said he wanted us to have a proper night. He talked about photography, about seeing beauty in real life, capturing emotion, preserving it forever. I nodded, but I wasn't listening. My eyes were glued to a photo he picked up, labeled 2 weeks from now. It was me, looking exactly how I was standing right then. And then I realized the most terrifying thing. Some of the photos didn't even look like they could exist yet. Me with bruises I had never had, me in streets I had never walked down, and worst of all, one of them showed me screaming, one of my worst nightmares coming true, dated a month from now. I needed to leave. I forced my legs to move toward the door. He followed calmly, matching my pace, always one step behind, never blocking, never rushing, just there. I fumbled with the doorknob. He said something quietly about leaving so soon, and I didn't answer. I just twisted the handle, pulled, almost ran down the hallway. Once I got to the lobby, I realized something else. The building was empty, too quiet. No elevator hum, no distant chatter, nothing. Just me walking out into the street, heart racing, trying to process what just happened. I went home and didn't sleep well. Kept picturing the walls, the camera, the photos. Kept thinking about the ones dated in the future, and if they were real, and how he even knew. I changed my locks. I checked my windows, my social media, everything. I had no idea how much he knew about me, how he got those photos. How'd he even predicted the future like that? Every day since then, I've been checking the streets I walk, my usual coffee shop, everywhere, always looking over my shoulder. Because the worst part is not knowing. The worst part is knowing that somewhere, someone has a complete record of me, including moments that haven't happened yet. Every smile, every injury, every tear. And I don't know which photo will come true next or when. I tell myself it's over, but I still feel like the walls are behind me. Like every step I take is already documented somewhere, waiting to appear on a wall I'll never see until it's too late. I met her on this dating app, nothing too fancy, just another swipe that actually led somewhere. She seemed different at first, quiet, intense eyes, calm energy. She wasn't the type to send a ton of messages, just enough to make me curious. We agreed to meet at this little cafe downtown, one of those places that looks kind of normal from the outside, but has this weird vibe inside, like the lighting was too soft, and the music was just a little off-key, almost cinematic. I got there first and waited, scrolling my phone like I always do, checking messages and emails. She arrived 10 minutes later, exactly as she said she would, wearing this simple outfit that somehow felt oddly rehearsed. The first thing she did was smile at me. Then she asked me to turn my phone off. Not just silence it, turn it completely off. I hesitated, but there was something in the way she looked at me, like she knew I would do it. So I did. And that's when the date started. It was weirdly perfect at first. The conversation flowed. She laughed at some of my dumb jokes, nodded at things I said that no one else usually cared about. She ordered coffee and a slice of cake for both of us. And I thought maybe this is it. This is just one of those dates that feels like it lasts forever in the best way. But I kept noticing small things, like the barista didn't seem to blink much, the couple at the corner table was staring too long at us, and the guy by the window seemed like he'd been frozen mid-bite. I told myself I was overthinking it, that maybe I just hadn't had enough sleep. She was very particular about everything. How I held my cup, how I ate the cake, even how I tilted my head when I laughed. I kept feeling like I was on stage, like she was watching me in a way no one should. After a while, we left the cafe. She insisted we walk through the park nearby. It was dusk, the shadows stretching long across the paths. Nothing felt wrong at first, but then I noticed that the usual joggers, dog walkers, even a few kids playing soccer seemed to disappear when we walked by. Benches that should have had people on them were empty, streetlights flickered just as we passed, and the soft hum of the city faded into silence. I started to feel uneasy, but I still didn't want to be rude. She kept talking, keeping the mood light, telling me little things about herself, but there was this undercurrent of control in her tone that made me tense. I wanted to check my phone, see what time it was, maybe just reach out to a friend, but I remembered her request. I couldn't. We ended up at a small apartment building she said she lived in. It looked normal enough, but the hall smelled faintly of bleach and something metallic. She opened the door and motioned me in. The apartment was almost empty, just a couch and a coffee table. But every item seemed meticulously placed. I remember noticing a calendar on the wall with no markings, no notes, just the current month. I shrugged it off. Then she asked me to sit. She said she had a surprise, something that would make the date unforgettable. I started to feel that knot in my stomach tighten, but I didn't know why. She made me close my eyes, and I did. I remember the seconds stretching, the silence pressing in, the faint smell of her perfume mixing with a metallic scent in the room. When I opened my eyes again, the apartment looked the same, but the sunlight had shifted in a way that made the room look longer. I reached for my phone, ready to check the time, and that's when panic hit me. My phone had been off for hours. I thought maybe an hour or two, but when I turned it back on, it buzzed violently. Hundreds of missed calls, dozens of text messages, notifications from social media, messages from my family, my boss, friends. The date had lasted, according to my phone, for almost 3 weeks. I stared at the screen, unable to breathe, scrolling through the messages. Every single person was frantic. They had all been trying to reach me, asking where I was, if I was okay. Some messages were in all caps, desperate, saying things like, "We've been looking everywhere, and please answer." I froze. 3 weeks. She had told me to turn off my phone for a couple hours, but 3 weeks had passed. I checked the calendar app. Appointments I never made, events I never scheduled, all lined up during the time I thought I had been on the date. Missed calls, voicemails, texts, none of them mine. It was like my entire life had gone on without me while I was there. I tried to leave, but when I looked around, the apartment had changed. The walls were longer, the hallway seemed to stretch impossibly far. I ran to the door and it didn't budge. I banged on it. She appeared behind me, calm, smiling, not apologetic, just there. I realized then that she hadn't done anything to me physically, but time itself had been manipulated, and I was trapped inside it. When the door finally opened, I ran down the stairs, out into the street. The city looked the same, but everyone I passed gave me a look like I was a ghost. People whispered, some pointed. My own reflection in a shop window startled me. It looked the same, but older in subtle ways, tired, as if my body had experienced weeks it didn't remember. I got home and my parents were outside, crying, yelling my name. The cops were there. Friends, neighbors, coworkers. Everyone thought I had disappeared for weeks. I tried to explain, but the words wouldn't come out. How do you explain that someone made 3 weeks of your life vanish, that a single date had rewound time around you, leaving everyone convinced you had been missing? My phone kept buzzing. Messages kept coming. Every one of them desperate, angry, concerned. Voicemails piled up. Some had recordings of me saying things I had never said, messages pleading for help, for someone to find me. It was surreal, like my life had been written by someone else while I was frozen inside this other reality. I deleted some messages, locked numbers, but it didn't stop. It was like the phone had absorbed the time I lost and was now forcing me to confront it. My friends wouldn't talk to me, or if they did, their eyes were full of confusion and fear. They treated me like I had been gone in a different world entirely. I didn't sleep for days going through my phone, trying to piece together what had happened, what had been real, and what had been created while I was trapped. And the worst part, I couldn't find her. She vanished as suddenly as she appeared. No trace online, no clue in the apartment. It was like she had existed only to steal time from me, to erase weeks from my life, while letting the rest of the world believe I had been missing. Now, every time I sit down somewhere, or go on another date, or even just check my phone, I feel that same pull of dread. I can't forget it. I can't trust turning my phone off. I can't trust anyone who asks me to, because I know now that time isn't always mine. It can be stolen, bent, erased, and even though she's gone, the echo of those lost weeks still follows me. I look at my phone now and it buzzes. I jump every time. A missed call from a number I don't recognize. I wonder if it's her. I hope it isn't. We messaged for a couple of weeks, nothing intense, just light conversation, sharing random thoughts about movies and music. When he finally asked me out, it felt a regular date, but I don't know why. Something about the way he wrote made me feel like I should say yes immediately. We met at a small bar downtown. It wasn't packed, just a few people scattered across the room. He was easy to spot, wearing a hoodie and jeans looking casual, but his eyes held something I couldn't quite place. We grabbed drinks, talked, laughed a little, and then he suggested we go to his place for a small get-together with some friends. At first I hesitated, but he reassured me it was just a few people, nothing weird, and part of me wanted to see more of his life. His apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building that looked old but well kept. The hall smelled faintly of coffee and old carpet. He led me inside and introduced me to his friends. They were all sitting on the couch and scattered around the living room, sipping beers and watching some old music videos. The moment he introduced me, something hit me like a jolt. They all looked at me with this odd intensity, and when they spoke, every single one called me by a different name. It wasn't just a nickname. They called me Claire. I froze for a moment, thinking maybe I misheard. My name is Sam. I repeated it in my head a few times, trying to shake it off, but every time someone said Claire, my body reacted. They didn't smile awkwardly or look confused. They looked like they'd been expecting me to respond. At first, I ignored it. I answered questions with my real name, trying to introduce myself properly, but every answer was met with laughter, nods, or comments that made it sound like I was the one who was wrong. Slowly, almost without realizing it, I found myself saying Claire when I replied. Not because I wanted to, but because it slipped out naturally. The more I said it, the more they smiled, like I had finally done the right thing. The evening went on, and the more time I spent there, the harder it became to remember that my name was Sam. They told stories about Claire, memories that sounded like mine, moments that I swore never happened, places I had never been, experiences I had never had. They spoke of them as if I had lived them. And the more I nodded along, the more I started to feel a strange ownership of these fake memories. It wasn't just the friends. Even in casual gestures, they treated me like I was someone else. The way they passed drinks, the way they laughed at things I didn't understand. They expected me to know who Claire was, what she liked, who she had been close to. I tried to correct myself a few times, but every correction was met with confusion, like I was losing my mind. Eventually, I stopped trying. I let the names slip. I let them frame reality for me. The apartment itself added to the unease. The walls were filled with photos. Every wall, even in the kitchen and hallway, had pictures. Photos of me or someone who looked exactly like me, doing things I couldn't remember. Smiling at parties I had never been to, standing in parks I didn't recognize, laughing with people I didn't know. All of them labeled Claire. I touched one carefully, trying to find some clue that it was fake, but the paper felt real, the gloss felt real. Even the air seemed to thrum with recognition. The weirdest part was how natural it became. By the time we were all sitting around later, I realized I had started to answer to Claire without thinking. When someone mentioned a shared memory, I could fill in details I had never experienced, but they fit perfectly. The more I played along, the more fluid it felt. My own identity, my real name, was fading, like it was being replaced by this other person. I left the apartment that night feeling altered. It was subtle at first. I said Claire a few times in texts, even when I wasn't thinking about him or his friends. I looked in the mirror and hesitated at my reflection, questioning who was staring back. The next day, my roommate asked who Claire was, and I said nothing, feeling a weird sense of shame or secrecy that wasn't mine. I started responding automatically, almost like the name had become a reflex. Days passed, and every interaction with people reminded me of this shift. Friends from outside his circle didn't understand why I was calling myself Claire, but internally it didn't feel wrong. I tried to tell myself it was just the effect of the date, that maybe I was exaggerating, but the feeling persisted. Emails, phone calls, even work interactions. I found myself answering to Claire without intending to, typing it out in text messages, introducing myself online with a new name by mistake. Then the real horror set in. I started dreaming vividly, not of normal dreams, but of events and moments as Claire. Parties, trips, arguments, intimate conversations that had never happened in my life. When I woke up, I had memories of those events, like they were real. I could describe people I had never met, places I had never gone, and situations I had never experienced. They all tied back to that night at his apartment. I tried to cut contact. I stopped messaging him, deleted his number, avoided the streets near his building. But the memories didn't go away. Even when I blocked social media, photos of me labeled Claire appeared in strange places. Group photos, tagged images, files on my computer I didn't remember saving. My own digital footprint was now haunted by this other identity. The more I tried to fight it, the stronger it became. When I looked at old photos of myself, my real name felt like a stranger's label. My real memories of Sam seemed to blur, like they were a dream I had forgotten upon waking. My friends started noticing. They asked why I was acting differently, why I seemed disconnected. Some even referred to me as Claire in passing, laughing it off like a joke. I didn't correct them. Weeks later, I walked past a cafe and saw him sitting with someone new. He smiled at me as if we had never met, and in my head, the name Claire jumped forward before Sam did. It was instinctive. It was terrifying. I realized that whatever happened that night, it wasn't just an influence. It was like he had planted a seed in my mind, a different version of myself that could slowly take over reality. Now, every time I meet someone new, I have to fight the urge to answer to Claire. Every introduction, every social interaction carries the risk of slipping back into that identity. It feels like my real self is locked behind a door that keeps getting pushed further away. And the thought that he is out there, doing the same to someone else, or maybe even following up, makes it impossible to feel safe. My apartment feels strange too. Even in familiar rooms, I sometimes glance at the corners and feel like I'm being observed by the version of me that exists elsewhere, the one shaped by him and his friends. My phone, my laptop, my social feeds. They all seem like tools he could use to reinforce that other identity, and I can't trust them anymore. The real terror isn't just remembering the night. It's remembering that I can forget myself. that I can be replaced quietly, convincingly, so completely that even my own memories aren't enough to stop it. I live in this constant tension between who I know I am and who everyone else, including myself, is starting to make me become. I don't know if Sam will ever fully exist again without Claire creeping in. And I don't know if I want to admit that a part of me now belongs to that other name, to that other identity. Sometimes when I look in the mirror, I almost answer when someone calls Claire, because the memory of that night was too vivid, too powerful, too consuming to ignore. Her profile was minimal, just a single photo that was too dark to make out much, and a short bio that said she liked nighttime walks and coffee at unusual hours. From the start, she refused to meet during the day. Every suggestion I made for coffee or lunch, she declined politely but firmly, insisting that she only went out after dark. At first, I thought it was quirky, maybe some work schedule or weird sleep pattern, but as the dates kept being pushed later and later, a little unease started to creep in. The messages were normal enough, nothing threatening. She asked questions about my life, my habits, my favorite late-night food spots. We traded photos of streets lit by neon signs, empty sidewalks, glowing coffee cups, and the occasional blurry night sky. There was something oddly magnetic about her tone, like she was seeing me in ways that no one else had before. I knew it was dangerous. I knew I should probably stop, but curiosity and that weird excitement of something forbidden kept me agreeing to meet her. We finally arranged to meet up at a park around 11 at night. I remember arriving first, circling the empty lot of the small park with streetlights flickering, the wind carrying a sharp chill. She was already there, or maybe she appeared out of nowhere, standing near a fountain that was more concrete than flowing water, shrouded in shadows. The first thing I noticed was that she didn't blink. Her eyes stayed fixed on mine the entire time I approached, unblinking, unflinching. It was impossible not to feel exposed under that gaze. We walked slowly along the park's winding paths. She moved gracefully, like she belonged there, like the darkness was an extension of her. I couldn't stop staring, and at some point I realized she had no reflection in the puddles scattered along the asphalt. I laughed nervously, thinking it was a trick of the streetlights or maybe my imagination. I stared at her as she reached for her coffee thermos, and the reflection in the water stayed empty. We kept walking. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, at least at first. The park had the quiet of a city asleep, only the occasional distant hum of a car or the faint rustle of leaves in the breeze. Then I saw it. I caught a glimpse of my own reflection in the puddle, and it wasn't there. It wasn't that it looked blurry or faint. It was like the puddle had no knowledge that I existed at all. I froze. She stopped a few steps ahead, turning slightly to watch me. No blink, no change, no expression I could read. Panic started bubbling up, but somehow my feet kept moving, drawing me closer to her as if I had no control. I checked the fountain. Still nothing. Not her, not me. Everything else in the park reflected normally, the streetlights, the trees, the empty benches, but not us. I tried to speak, but my voice felt heavy, like it weighed more than my lungs could carry. She tilted her head slightly, and for the first time, she smiled. It wasn't warm. It wasn't friendly. It was a knowing smile, like she had been waiting for this moment, and I was supposed to understand something I couldn't. The walk continued, and I noticed more details I had ignored before. The way shadows bent differently around her, the way the night felt thicker, like the air itself was trying to pull me into her orbit. It was disorienting. Every streetlight seemed dimmer when she passed. Every reflection that should have existed stayed empty. The panic grew, but there was a strange calm too, a trance-like pull that made it impossible to look away. We stopped at a small bridge. She leaned on the railing and stared down at the water below. No reflection. I forced myself to look into the river, half expecting to see some distortion of myself, some confirmation that I was still here in the physical world. Nothing. The water was clear, smooth, unbroken, empty of me. I tried touching the water. The coldness bit into my fingers, but still no reflection. My panic started turning into terror, but a terrifying curiosity held me there, frozen in place like a moth in front of a flame. The night seemed to stretch, minutes turning into hours. Every step I took beside her felt like a slow erasure. My reflection was gone not just in water, but in the shop windows we passed, and the car mirrors parked along empty streets. She was always just ahead, her smile constant, unwavering. I felt my grip on reality loosening. The city lights flickered, and I realized I couldn't remember what color my hair had been or the exact shape of my hands. The more I focused on her, the more I felt myself melting into the darkness, becoming part of her world. We stopped finally at the edge of an empty plaza. She faced me fully now, close enough that I could see every detail of her unblinking eyes, every subtle movement in her posture, but nothing reflected me back. My stomach churned. I felt hollowed out, as if the world itself was refusing to acknowledge me. She reached out, and instinctively I reached back. The moment our fingers brushed, a strange warmth passed through me, but it wasn't comforting. It was consuming. Time lost meaning. I couldn't tell if we were standing there for seconds or hours. The lights above us flickered, and every shadow seemed to whisper and shift. She smiled, and I felt a pull. I was being drawn into her shape, into her absence. My skin prickled, my thoughts scattered, and I realized that I wasn't just not reflecting. I was becoming like her. Part of the darkness, part of the night itself. Later, when I remember the walk back, it's hazy. The empty streets, the silent bridges, the way the city seemed to fold around us like a blanket. Nothing left a trace of me. No puddles, no mirrors, no windows. I glanced at my phone and the screen reflected only darkness. The screen illuminated my face briefly, but even then it felt wrong. She was always there, always just beyond my peripheral vision, pulling me further into the world she occupied. I got home eventually, though I don't remember the exact moment. The apartment felt different, alien. My reflection was gone in every mirror, even the ones in the bathroom that used to greet me every morning. The glow from my computer, from the little lead strip I had set up along the ceiling, cast shadows, but none of them carried my shape. It was as if I had never been, as if my existence had been rewritten. Sleep didn't help. In dreams, she appeared constantly, leading me through streets I had never walked, cities I had never known. Each time I tried to touch my reflection in the surfaces we passed, and each time nothing came back. I woke up with a hollow sensation in my chest, a gnawing awareness that I wasn't entirely there anymore. I still moved, still spoke, still tried to live a normal life, but everywhere I went my reflection was gone. Friends started asking questions. They noticed oddities, why I never showed up in photos, why group selfies always had a blank space where I should be. I laughed it off, made excuses, but inside, panic bubbled. I could feel the darkness of that night following me, creeping in around edges, waiting for the moment I'd fully dissolve into it. I don't go out at night anymore. I avoid mirrors, reflective surfaces, water, anything that could remind me of the person I used to be. But even in daylight, in the safest places, I can feel her presence. The pull. The subtle tug at the edges of myself. Sometimes I catch a shadow out of the corner of my eye, standing a few feet away, unblinking, and I know it's her. Guiding me, drawing me closer. Every time, I realize a little more of me is gone, replaced with absence, replaced with night. The last thing I remember clearly is standing in front of a puddle, trying to see myself, and only seeing darkness. A deep, solid, empty black. And her just beyond me, smiling, unblinking, patient. Our chats were easy at first, like talking to someone who had memorized how to seem familiar, but the familiarity quickly turned sharp, like I was stepping into a place I didn't remember. We met at a little diner downtown. It was crowded, neon signs buzzing, fries sizzling, coffee steaming in mugs bigger than my head. He was already there when I arrived, waving with that same unnerving smile. The first hour felt normal enough. We ordered food, laughed at bad jokes, traded stories that seemed believable but vague. Then the subtle weirdness began. He remembered things I didn't, like inside jokes I couldn't recall, comments I hadn't made. At first, I laughed it off. Maybe my memory was just fuzzy, or maybe he had a photographic memory. After a few dates, the charm started to erode. He started showing up in the background of my day-to-day in ways I couldn't explain. In the coffee shop I went to on a Saturday morning, I swore I saw him sitting in the corner, not moving, just watching. When I looked back, he was gone. On the street, I glimpsed someone with the same hoodie and smile turning a corner too quickly to be real. Every time I chalked it up to coincidence, but the feeling of being followed kept growing. Finally, I blocked him on the app. I thought that would end it, that digital severing would bring relief. The first night was quiet, but then my phone buzzed. A notification from the app itself. I opened it, heart thumping, and my profile said I was in a relationship. My name, my photo, his photo. I hadn't agreed to it, hadn't interacted. I tried refreshing, logging out, reinstalling. Nothing changed. The next day, the app flooded me with memories. Snapshots of dinner dates I didn't recall, walks through parks I had never been to, conversations I had never spoken. Some were small things, holding a coffee cup together, laughing over a shared dessert, but others were more unsettling. Him touching my face, me leaning against him, eyes closed, smiling like I had known him forever. The images were high resolution, too detailed to be stock photos or AI generated. My phone was showing me moments that hadn't existed, or maybe they had and I had forgotten. I started keeping the log. Screenshots, notes, timestamps. Each day, the app added more memories. They weren't just photos. They were videos, tiny clips of motion, of laughter, of a life I didn't live. Sometimes I tried to question my own recollection. Maybe I had been more involved than I remembered. Maybe I had imagined blocking him. But the feeling that this wasn't my memory, that someone else was manipulating what I thought I knew about my life, grew heavier. I stopped going out alone. Streets seemed unfamiliar, even the ones I knew by heart. The diner felt wrong. The coffee shop was a trap. Every reflective surface was a reminder that the life I thought I had might not be real. The phone became both prison and oracle. I couldn't delete the app. Every attempt failed. It reinstalled itself, restored all the memories, restored the relationship status, like it had a life independent of me. Friends noticed. Group chats filled with jokes about me disappearing. I brushed it off, pretending it was anxiety, stress, too much screen time. Inside, panic was growing. I started seeing him in places I knew he couldn't be. In the reflection of my fridge, the gleam of my kitchen faucet, a shadow in the background of photos taken before I met him. I would look closer, and he would vanish, leaving only a faint flicker, a disturbance in the corner of my vision. One night, I woke up to my phone buzzing on the nightstand. Notifications stacked up, dozens, hundreds. The app had generated a whole day of memories while I slept. The videos were disturbing, clips of me doing things I didn't recognize, interacting with him, laughing, crying, eating, existing in ways I didn't remember. The final clip was him leaning in close to the camera, his smile impossibly wide, and the label said, "You'll remember soon." Sleep became impossible. I carried the phone everywhere, afraid to leave it alone. Sometimes, while charging it, I would glance at it out of the corner of my eye and see him sitting on my bed, just beyond the glow of the screen, unblinking, smiling. He never moved, never spoke, but a sense of being watched was overwhelming. I couldn't leave the apartment without taking it with me. I tried telling the app company, but there was no support line, no human contact. The app existed, but it refused to exist. The more I interacted, the more memories appeared. The photos became progressively more intimate, more detailed and more terrifying. He was always there, always smiling, always recording me, always creating a life I hadn't lived. Days blurred together. I stopped checking the time. My phone kept generating new clips, new snapshots. Sometimes I would look at the videos and see myself younger, thinner, older, injured, smiling, crying. Each image had timestamps that made no sense, some in the past, some in the future, some overlapping. I couldn't tell what was real anymore, and worse, I was starting to feel like I was complicit, like I had consented to some terrible shared reality I couldn't escape. I moved apartments once, hoping to leave the phone behind, but the moment I plugged it in, the same memories began appearing again, as if nothing had changed. The new place felt invaded, every corner familiar yet alien. The videos now included him following me through the apartment, sitting in the kitchen, leaning against walls, always smiling. The sense of inevitability grew. He wasn't just in the app anymore. He was in the spaces I inhabited, and the app was only the first layer. Sometimes I stared at my reflection in the darkened screen. My face looked right, but something in my eyes flickered, like the images from the app were leaking into me, rewriting my expression, my memory, my awareness of who I was. I couldn't sleep without the screen casting light across my chest, showing glimpses of a life that wasn't mine. I stopped answering messages from anyone else. Phone calls went unanswered. Friends texted to check in, but I ignored them, afraid their images or voices could be twisted into memories I hadn't lived. My reality shrank to the phone, the app, him, and the fabricated life he had made me live. The last thing I remember before I stopped sleeping altogether was opening the app and seeing a memory labeled "Today." It showed me in the apartment, sitting on the couch, staring at my phone, recording myself, recording him. I blinked, horrified, and when I looked again, the memory was gone, replaced with a new one of me smiling beside him, laughing, holding coffee cups like we'd always been together. Now, when I glance at the phone, it's just a black screen, but I know it's waiting. Waiting to create more memories, more days, more existence I never asked for. I don't know who I am outside of the app anymore, but I know he's still smiling, still creating, still waiting for the next memory to drag me further into a life I didn't live. Honestly, I was tired of swiping through faces that looked nothing like the photos. Her profile was simple, messy bun, oversized hoodie, cluttered bookshelf in the background. The bio said she loved animals and long walks. Nothing alarming, nothing unusual. Her messages were funny and casual, not over the top, so I matched with her without thinking too much. We set up a date at a small bistro in a part of the city I didn't normally go to. The place was dim, candles on each table, a faint smell of garlic and basil lingering. She arrived on time, wearing a vintage leather jacket and carrying a bag that looked heavy, like it had been living a life of its own. The first thing I noticed was her smile. It wasn't just polite, it was like she was genuinely excited to be there. We sat, ordered coffee, talked about movies, music, life stuff, normal first date things. It was easy too easy. I started thinking maybe the app actually worked for once. Then she leaned over, whispering, or at least I thought she did, and said she needed to introduce me to someone. I laughed nervously, thinking it was a friend she had brought along, but the moment she pulled the zipper on her bag, I froze. Inside was a fully grown raccoon. It had a black mask across its eyes and tiny, dexterous hands clutching the edge of the bag. It blinked at me and chattered in a way that sounded almost like words. She explained casually that the raccoon lived with her, had been rescued from somewhere she wouldn't specify, and it insisted on being part of every conversation. I laughed awkwardly at first, thinking she was joking, but then the raccoon climbed out of the bag and settled in the chair opposite me, tail flicking, eyes sharp. It started making little noises whenever I spoke, moving closer when I got animated, retreating when I paused. She seemed completely normal with this. She handed it a tiny espresso cup, which it ignored, and it began chattering again, almost conversationally, like it was contributing opinions to the date. The night progressed, and I realized I couldn't escape its presence. At first, I tried pretending it wasn't there, focusing on her, thinking maybe it would calm down. But it didn't. It followed our every movement, mimicked gestures, occasionally knocking over utensils just to remind me it was there. People at other tables glanced, some whispered, but she acted like it was normal. She introduced me to it by name, explained its favorite foods, its quirks, even its opinions about certain movies. She treated it like a roommate, a friend, a fully sentient member of her household, which in hindsight, it probably was. After dinner, we walked through a park nearby. She carried a small backpack that seemed impossibly light for holding a full-grown raccoon. I assumed it was in there, but then it scampered ahead of us, leaping from branch to branch in trees along the path, eyes fixed on me, tail flicking like it was judging. She laughed at my startled reaction, completely unbothered. She talked about her life as if this raccoon had always been there, and maybe in a way it had. Every story, every past event, seemed to include the animal as if it had been shaping her choices, her personality, her entire world. The thing that got under my skin wasn't the raccoon itself. It was how much attention it demanded, how aware it seemed of me, how it seemed to notice the smallest expressions, the tiniest changes in tone. When I smiled, it smiled back, too deliberately. When I tried to gesture or explain something, it interrupted with a chittering noise that almost sounded like commentary. It was too intentional. I kept thinking maybe I was imagining the intelligence behind its movements, but the way it mirrored my posture, the timing of its noises, made it impossible to ignore. We eventually ended up at her apartment. The door opened, and the raccoon bolted inside like it owned the place, leaping onto the counter, inspecting the fridge, knocking over mugs like a tiny inspector. The apartment was a mix of cozy clutter and organized chaos, piles of books, scattered clothes, half-finished art projects, but every area seemed designed for the raccoon's comfort as much as hers. There were small hammocks, tiny shelves, even a little blanket nest that looked absurdly plush for an animal of its size. She moved around it like it was an extension of her body, reaching over it, adjusting things, apologizing if it got in my way like it was her main priority. I sat on the couch, trying to process everything. She brought over a blanket for me, which the raccoon immediately claimed, sitting on my lap, paws kneading gently. I froze, heart racing. She apologized, laughing softly, explaining it had a habit of bonding with new people quickly. I nodded, trying to act casual, but my mind was racing. This was not what I had signed up for. Yet at the same time, she was magnetic, the raccoon a bizarre sort of charm, and I couldn't leave without seeming rude or freaked out. The night dragged on. The raccoon became increasingly vocal, chattering, occasionally tugging at my sleeves, sniffing my hair, nudging me toward the couch cushions or food items. She fed it little snacks, which it accepted with dignity, then returned to staring at me like it was evaluating. She told stories about its early life, rescue attempts, how it had adapted to living with humans, all while the raccoon made noises of agreement or dissent at the appropriate moments. It was uncanny. More than once, I caught myself thinking it understood every word I said. By the time I left, I was exhausted, not just tired, but drained, like the raccoon had consumed more than my attention. It had consumed my mental space, my comfort zone. She walked me to the door, raccoon perched on her shoulder, tail curling around her neck. She waved, laughing, promising to text soon. I nodded, stepped out, and immediately felt the quiet of the street without the chittering presence. It was relief, but also a hollow sort of unease, as if part of me had left behind something I didn't understand. Over the next few days, I tried to contact her, but my messages went unanswered. I checked the app, hoping maybe we could set up another date, but the profile was gone, deleted, vanished. I thought maybe I'd imagined everything. But then small things started happening. Shadows flickered in the corner of my vision. Noises in the apartment building, scratches, faint chittering, though no one else lived above or below me. I would dream of raccoon eyes staring at me from dark corners, tail flicking, paws moving as if mimicking my gestures. Eventually, I stopped using the app, stopped dating entirely. The image of her and that raccoon stayed with me, persistent and impossible to shake. Sometimes, in the quiet of my apartment, I could swear I heard a soft chittering, just on the edge of hearing, almost like a reminder. She and the raccoon existed, somewhere, maybe watching, maybe judging, maybe waiting for the next conversation, the next date, the next person to test its uncanny presence. I never got a clear explanation of why she lived with a fully grown raccoon, why it seemed so aware, why it demanded participation. But I realized quickly that it wasn't about logic. It was about the way she and that animal operated together, a symbiosis that left anyone new feeling off balance, watched, and somehow complicit in the strange world. Now, even months later, I can't look at raccoons the same way. The images online, the videos of them climbing garbage cans, their tiny hands and masked faces, it all triggers a memory of that date. I can't shake the way it moved, how it seemed to follow my thoughts, how it made me aware of my own reactions like a mirror with claws. Dating apps feel dangerous in a way I never understood, and every time my phone buzzes with a new match, I hesitate, thinking about the pair of eyes that had silently judged me over coffee, over dinner, over a night I can't unsee. The world suddenly felt smaller after that night. It was a presence, a measuring stick for reality, and the fact that I had survived the date intact felt like luck more than skill. I matched with him on a quiet Sunday afternoon, just scrolling through the app while I ate leftover pizza on my couch. His profile was the kind that makes you pause without thinking too hard. A casual picture of him leaning against a brick wall, leather jacket, that crooked smile that looks like it's hiding something, the kind that seems charming without trying. His bio said he loved puzzles, mystery novels, and nights that weren't predictable. I swiped right, figuring it wouldn't hurt to talk for a bit, and within an hour he messaged me. At first, he was exactly what his profile promised: funny, clever, easy to talk to. Our messages flowed without awkward gaps, teasing, small jokes, and he seemed genuinely interested in my little details, the kind of attention that's rare online. After a week, he suggested we meet for dinner at a place he claimed was new and underground, tucked away in a side street. He said it was the kind of place only locals knew about, the kind with mood lighting and secret corners. I thought it sounded fun, mysterious, maybe even exciting, and agreed. When I got there, the street was narrow, lined with old brick buildings, graffiti tags smudged across doors and windows. The place didn't have a sign, just a faint hum of music leaking out from behind a heavy metal door. He was waiting outside, smiling, holding the door open like a polite host. We walked in together, and the interior was dimly lit, a maze of narrow hallways, exposed pipes, and old light bulbs dangling from the ceiling. It smelled faintly of sawdust and old varnish. I noticed immediately that it wasn't a normal restaurant or bar, but I assumed it was some kind of themed cafe or secret bar. He introduced me to the owner, who gave us a nod, and then we were alone. He suggested we start with something interactive, saying the place had mini games for guests. I laughed, thinking it was quirky, like a table puzzle or some escape room style challenge, and agreed. Then he handed me a small envelope. Inside was a map, cryptic instructions, and a key. I thought it was a joke at first, but the moment I unfolded the map, the hallway seemed different. It was darker, tighter, and he was acting like he expected me to follow along, like I was part of the game already. The first room we entered was completely silent, except for the faint hum of ventilation. It had furniture that seemed out of place, drawers that wouldn't open, locked boxes, and notes with riddles scrawled in messy handwriting. I started playing along, figuring it was all part of the theme. He smiled encouragingly, giving hints, watching my reactions, asking questions about my logic. I laughed nervously at how realistic it all felt, how much attention he gave to every little movement I made, like he had designed the room around me. After the first room, he led me to another, then another, each one more complex and confined. The air started to feel thicker, warmer, and I noticed small things that didn't make sense. Keys that didn't fit, notes that seemed too personalized, furniture shifted slightly between rooms. I tried to ask about it, but he kept saying it was part of the experience, the game, that each challenge was tailored to the player. I started feeling uneasy, a tingle in the back of my neck, but I laughed it off, telling myself I was overreacting. Then we reached a room that didn't look like part of the game. The lighting was harsher, the walls closer, the air heavier. There was a chair in the middle and a small table with papers spread across it. On the papers were descriptions, photos, even receipts, all of me. The dates, the places I had been, screenshots of my messages, even photos I hadn't shared publicly. My stomach dropped, and for the first time, I stopped laughing. He leaned against the doorframe, smiling like it was all normal, and said it was part of the final challenge. He said the game only ended when the participants solved the ultimate puzzle. Panic started to rise. I realized I hadn't agreed to this. My phone was in my bag in the previous room, my bag locked behind a door I hadn't noticed. He was calm, watching, cataloging my every reaction. The reality of the situation pressed down like the walls themselves. I started running through the puzzles frantically, desperate for an exit, and the room seemed to multiply, twist, and extend unnaturally. He gave hints only when I hesitated too long, but each hint led to more rooms, more corridors, more personalized clues. My heart pounded, my hands shook. It hit me that the charming guy I had met online had designed this entire thing with me in mind. I wasn't a date anymore, I was a participant. Hours passed. The doors never seemed to lead outside. The notes became darker, mentioning scenarios, outcomes, even consequences if I didn't solve them. The first laughter and excitement were gone. It was replaced by terror and the creeping realization that he had done this before, that he was careful, methodical, and absolutely in control. I searched for cameras, hidden switches, anything to signal someone outside. The walls themselves seemed to hum with presence, like the space was alive. At some point, exhaustion made my thinking sluggish. I realized I didn't know the layout anymore, the hallways repeated, the doors looped back. The owner never appeared again. He was always just behind me, watching, guiding, observing, his smile unwavering. He asked questions about the puzzles, my logic, how I felt, all while I felt smaller and smaller, trapped inside the intricate maze of his creation. I tried screaming, but the walls absorbed sound. I banged on doors, kicked furniture, nothing worked. Each failed attempt triggered new rooms, new challenges. It was impossible to keep track of time. I didn't know if minutes or hours had passed. Food and water appeared occasionally, leaving crumbs in bottles just enough to keep me moving. He told me it was part of the realism, that the game should feel endless, immersive. I started feeling like I was losing grip on reality. Finally, by sheer chance, A mistake in a lock combination opened a side door that led to an emergency exit. I bolted, lungs burning, adrenaline making every nerve scream. Outside, the city was quiet, empty streets reflecting the night sky. I didn't wait to look back. I ran until the buildings looked unfamiliar, until the maze behind me became just a nightmare I was leaving behind. Later, I called the police, described the location, the man, the maze of rooms. They investigated, but he and the building were gone. Neighbors had no memory of any unusual activity, no strange bar or underground escape rooms. It was like the whole thing had existed only for me, a personalized terror constructed around my trust, my curiosity, my willingness to believe in charm. Even weeks later, the images of the rooms haunt me. Every time I see a puzzle online, a new escape room advertisement, a photo of a brick alleyway, I can feel the weight of the corridors pressing down. I've tried dating apps again, but the thought of charm hiding intent keeps me frozen. Every date that starts off funny, clever, easy, makes me question every smile, every subtle look, every invitation to come see something special. What terrifies me the most is knowing he's still out there running his games, charming new people, building new mazes that only he fully understands, waiting for someone curious enough to follow the clues. And no one else ever suspects. No one else ever sees the warning signs. I've never deleted the app entirely, but I can't swipe without looking over my shoulder. The memory of that night is permanent, engraved into the edges of my perception. Charm, puzzles, mystery, they aren't fun anymore. They are a trap, a design meant to ensnare the willing. His profile seemed like the usual. Decent photos, vaguely funny captions, the kind that promised charm without being overwhelming. When he messaged me, his words were casual, easy to read, and I liked that he didn't overthink responses. After a few days of chatting, he suggested we meet for coffee at a small cafe he liked downtown. I figured it would be normal, low pressure, and agreed. The cafe was dim but cozy, with exposed brick walls and mismatched furniture. When I arrived, he was already there, sitting at a corner table with a half-empty cup of coffee, scrolling on his phone. He stood up, smiled, and gestured for me to sit. At first, everything felt normal. He was polite, attentive, and surprisingly witty in person. He asked questions, laughed at my jokes, and didn't seem pushy about anything. I started relaxing, thinking this might actually go well. After about an hour of chatting, he suggested we take a walk. It was spring, the streets wet from an afternoon drizzle, the smell of asphalt and blooming flowers mixing in the air. He said he wanted to show me something unique, a place he discovered years ago. It sounded harmless enough, just a short walk away. I followed, not noticing how quiet the streets had become, the occasional passerby giving us sideways glances. We arrived at a narrow, unmarked door tucked between two older buildings. He unlocked it with a key he kept on a chain around his neck, and we stepped inside. The interior was dark, musty, and surprisingly large. Walls lined with shelves and display cases, the floor covered with worn rugs that muffled our footsteps. I assumed it was some private gallery or collector's room. He smiled, telling me he loved oddities and personal collections. I didn't think much of it at first. Then he started showing me around, pointing to small boxes, jars, even picture frames. At first, the items seemed harmless. Trinkets, jewelry, small souvenirs. Then I noticed tiny notes attached to each item, written in meticulous handwriting. The notes weren't about history or origin. They described people. My stomach sank when I realized the notes weren't generic. They were detailed observations, psychological notes about habits, reactions, emotional triggers. He explained he liked to study people to understand them. He emphasized that he kept these collections from previous dates, each labeled with a date, a location, and the person's name. I froze. Every trinket, every note, every little item belonged to someone he had dated, observed, and cataloged. He wasn't showing me a quirky collection. He was showing me evidence of obsession, methodical tracking of every interaction. My mind raced. The polite man I had met at the cafe was someone entirely different here, someone meticulous and detached, someone who had spent years documenting people's lives in ways that were deeply personal and invasive. He walked me past rows of shelves. wallets, watches, earrings, even clothing items, all carefully displayed. The notes were unsettling. He described reactions, moods, what people revealed in conversations, weaknesses, things they never told anyone. The handwriting was neat, almost clinical, yet the content was intimate and disturbing. My pulse quickened, my hands shook slightly as I realized how organized and obsessive this was. He noticed my discomfort but didn't stop. Instead, he smiled wider and said it was part of the experience, that he liked to see how people reacted when confronted with the reality of being observed, analyzed, cataloged. He explained that some of the notes were written after years of following people online and offline, sometimes months of subtle interaction before an item ended up in his museum. I tried to keep calm, thinking maybe I could leave, but the room was more like a labyrinth than a single space. Hallways of shelves stretched out in angles that didn't make sense, creating corners I hadn't noticed. Every turn revealed more items, more notes, more evidence of meticulous tracking. It was overwhelming. The thought of how many people he had studied, how carefully he had documented them, made my head spin. He guided me to a small room at the back, the lighting dimmer, the air heavier. In this room, the collections were more personal. Handwritten letters, personal keepsakes, even photos taken discreetly. He told me he kept this room for the most interesting personalities, the ones who challenged him, made him think differently. As he spoke, I felt like I was being evaluated, analyzed, a new subject in a room of ghosts and remnants. My phone was in my bag back in the cafe room, out of reach. He explained that he preferred in-person observation, that the devices people carried could distort reality. I realized then that I was trapped in the museum, both physically and psychologically. Each object, each note was a reminder that I could be next, that my reactions, habits, and even subtle expressions would be documented and cataloged. He showed me one last section, the most meticulously arranged. Items lined up like trophies, each tagged with dates, names, and a paragraph of psychological insight. I could feel my pulse in my ears as I understood that I had been lured into this space, not just for a date, but as part of an ongoing collection. The casual charm, the laughter, the easy conversation, it had all been a prelude to this revelation. The walls seemed to close in as he talked, detailing patterns, behaviors, and tendencies. My mind raced with questions about consent, about privacy, about how many people had walked into this museum unknowingly. He explained that the museum was his way of studying humanity, of understanding connections, of feeling control. The casual explanation did nothing to ease the dread that filled me. I needed to leave. I told myself it was enough, that this was the end of the date. He didn't resist, but watched me carefully as I made my way toward the exit. The hallways twisted, the floor uneven, and it felt like the museum was alive, breathing, observing my every step. Finally, I reached the door, stepped out into the damp street, and didn't look back. The city was quiet, too quiet, streets empty in ways that felt staged. I walked home fast, trying to shake off the sensation that someone was cataloging my every movement. The museum stayed in my mind, a vivid, invasive image, rows of shelves filled with reminders of people's private lives, meticulously labeled, stored, and studied. Even days later, I couldn't stop thinking about the objects, the notes, the man who collected them. Every time I saw someone leaving a cafe, or a couple holding hands, or a backpack left unattended, my mind drew connections to the museum. The idea of charm masking obsession, of a dating profile leading to a personal archive of someone's life, made every swipe online feel dangerous. I deleted the app after that, avoiding casual interactions, avoiding strangers who seemed perfect. The memory of the museum, of that carefully curated collection, is permanent. I think about the people who never realized they were studied, whose items now sit behind glass in a dim room somewhere, and the man who made that possible still walks around, charming, polite, harmless in public. It terrifies me, the thought that anyone who seems normal could be part of something structured, obsessive, and deeply personal. And I can't stop thinking that maybe the next person he targets, the next item in his museum, could be anyone, including someone I know. I swiped right mostly out of boredom, expecting nothing serious. Our chat started casually, light jokes, shared memes, a few comments about movies. After a few days, he suggested we meet for dinner. I agreed, thinking it would be a chill, low-key night. He arrived at the cafe with a giant suitcase on wheels, looking like he was traveling for a week. At first I assumed it was a joke, like he was trying to be funny about bringing half his life on a first date. He didn't open it there, insisted we talk first, and I didn't push. The restaurant was busy, a modern diner with colorful neon lights and the smell of fried food in the air. He was polite, attentive, charming even, though the suitcase sat next to him like an ominous shadow. We talked for a while, shared stories, laughed at awkward things, and I started to relax. But my eyes kept drifting to the suitcase. It was massive, one of those old-fashioned hard shells, the kind that looked like it could hide something big. I wondered what he had packed, imagining clothes, maybe a weird hobby like juggling equipment. He noticed my glances but just smiled, gave vague comments like, "You'll see when we get to my place." I laughed nervously, thinking he was playing some kind of weird game, but deep down my stomach felt tight. After dinner, he suggested we walk. The streets were emptying, the air cold, and he rolled the suitcase effortlessly behind him. I started to notice the way he handled it, the careful attention, almost reverence. Every now and then, he looked back at me and smiled like I was part of some secret. We walked several blocks, turning down quiet side streets until we arrived at a small apartment building. It was unremarkable from the outside, plain brick, a flickering light above the door. He unlocked the door and ushered me in, the suitcase leading the way. Inside, the apartment was small, sparsely furnished, but neat. A few framed photos on the wall, basic furniture, a kind of place that looked lived in but not personal. He motioned for me to sit while he went to close the door, and my eyes immediately landed on the suitcase in the middle of the living room. He knelt beside it, fingers tracing the handle, and told me this was a special part of the evening. He asked me to promise not to touch anything until he opened it, and I nodded, uneasy but curious. He pulled the latches slowly, carefully, almost ceremoniously. The zipper opened, and inside were life-sized mannequins. They were stacked upright, wrapped in protective fabric. He started unwrapping them one by one, and my heart sank as the forms became clear. They were dressed in his clothes, identical outfits to what he had worn during our dates, from casual shirts to jackets, even his sneakers. Each mannequin had his hair styled exactly like his, the facial features eerily familiar, like he had sculpted them to match his own. I froze, staring, trying to understand. He explained that these were his companions, each a representation of himself during different phases of life or moods. Some were casual, some formal, some even had tiny accessories like glasses or watches he used to wear. He said he liked to create a physical version of himself that could accompany him, someone he could talk to, interact with, and never argue with. I forced myself to breathe, but every word he said made my skin crawl. The mannequins were arranged in a semicircle, facing the sofa where we had sat. He moved one slightly, adjusting the arm, and it was like they were alive, aware of the room. He explained that he sometimes staged conversations with them, practicing jokes, practicing empathy, practicing how to charm people like me. The thought of him talking to copies of himself, rehearsing social interactions, made my stomach turn. I felt trapped, like an observer of a ritual I didn't understand. He didn't stop. He opened drawers revealing smaller figures, tiny dolls also dressed like him, meticulously painted to match his facial expressions. I could see the obsession, the level of detail, the countless hours of shaping, dressing, arranging. He smiled, talking about how each mannequin represented a version of him he admired or wanted to preserve, a kind of immortality through replicas. I tried to imagine leaving, moving away, but the apartment felt like a maze. Mannequins were in corners, partially hidden behind furniture, creating shadows that danced under the dim lights. The air smelled faintly of wax, fabric, and something like hair gel. Every step I took seemed amplified in the quiet, every movement of the mannequins exaggerated in the low lighting. He brought out one more mannequin, the largest, closest to life size, and placed it directly across from me. It wore the jacket he had on tonight, the same sneakers, the same watch. The face was almost exact. I felt a strange compulsion, a mix of fear and fascination, as if the mannequin was a mirror of the living man in front of me, blurring the lines between reality and replica. I realized then that all his charm, the easy smiles, the casual laughter, the effortless conversation, it might have been rehearsed. Every movement, every word, calculated, practiced in front of these mannequins until perfected. The idea of dating someone who treated reality like a rehearsal, who created physical versions of himself to interact with instead of living naturally, was terrifying. He invited me to sit with the mannequins to watch as he adjusted them, positioning them as if we were having a small gathering. My mind raced, trying to rationalize, trying to pretend this was harmless, like some bizarre art project. But the level of detail, the obsession with perfection, the way he arranged them as if alive, made it impossible to ignore. I eventually said I needed to leave, moving toward the door, my hands trembling. He didn't try to stop me, only smiled and reminded me to come back sometime, that he was always creating, always perfecting, always adding to the collection. The sound of the suitcase wheels rolling behind him as I left echoed in my head, and I couldn't shake the image of the apartment filled with replicas of himself, lined up and waiting, silent, watching, and rehearsing endlessly. On the street, the city felt unreal, almost too bright, almost too ordinary. I walked fast, avoiding eye contact with strangers, feeling like mannequins themselves might be everywhere, waiting to perfect their behavior in secret. The memory of the apartment stayed vivid. The mannequins, the obsession, the quiet ritual, the meticulous care for replicas of one man's own image. Even weeks later, when I see someone wearing a jacket like his, or walking with a particular stride, or talking in a casual, rehearsed way, my mind immediately draws a connection. The idea that someone could live surrounded by copies of themselves, practicing interactions with a world they never fully inhabit, stays with me. The apartment, the mannequins, and the way he smiled at me as if I was now part of the audience, it won't leave my mind. I matched with her on a slow Tuesday afternoon, just swiping while half watching the show. Her profile was full of cosmic quotes, zodiac symbols, and photos of her holding tarot cards or staring at the sky at sunrise. At first, I thought it was kind of quirky, maybe over the top, but I liked weird, so I swiped right. Our conversation started normal enough, light banter, a few shared interests, mostly movies and food. After a couple of days, she suggested we meet for dinner, mentioning that the planets were in a bad alignment and it would make the night intense, but she laughed it off in the chat. I thought it was cute, like she was joking about astrology, so I agreed. I arrived at the restaurant first, a small rooftop place tucked above a bookstore, exposed to the chilly evening air but with string lights that made it look cozy. She arrived a few minutes later, carrying a backpack covered in pins of zodiac signs. She smiled, and it was warm, easy, like meeting someone I'd already known online. We sat down at a table overlooking the city skyline. I noticed immediately that she kept glancing up at the sky, tilting her head, like she was reading invisible charts. I thought it was cute at first, harmless, until the first strange thing happened. As soon as we ordered, a waiter tripped carrying drinks from a nearby table, spilling a glass of water directly across from us, soaking the edge of our table. She blinked slowly and said, "The planets warned me," in a way that was half joking, half serious. I laughed nervously, thinking it was coincidence, but her intense gaze made it feel like I was missing something. We talked through appetizers and drinks, and I noticed more little things. A car alarm went off in the street below exactly when she mentioned a bad Mars influence. A couple at the next table argued loudly as if on cue, pausing just as she said Mercury was retrograde. I told myself it was all coincidence, random city noise, but it kept happening, timing too precise to ignore. Each small mishap she pointed out made me more tense. After dinner, she suggested we walk along a narrow alley toward a small park nearby. The alley was dim, lined with murals of planets and stars, and she kept talking about planetary alignments, gesturing to imaginary charts in the sky. As we walked, a trash can tipped over, spilling its contents across the path, right when she said Saturn was displeased. Pigeons flew from a corner, scattering in perfect timing with her words about lunar chaos. My stomach twisted, thinking it was all too coordinated. We reached the park, and she pulled out a small notebook, scribbling symbols and notes. She explained she tracked bad alignments, the kinds that could make someone's day go wrong, and she liked to predict them. She said she could tell that the universe was tense, that tonight, accidents, arguments, and disturbances would follow us. And they did. A streetlight flickered overhead, dimmed and brightened, as she muttered about Jupiter's position. A dog barked continuously from behind a fence, as if punctuating her comment about unsettled energy. I started to notice myself reacting strangely. At first, I laughed nervously at the timing of things, trying to chalk it up to chance, but my brain kept catching the synchronicity. Every minor disruption felt orchestrated. I spilled coffee on my jacket, almost like the world was punctuating her words. My phone buzzed repeatedly, notifications stacking in a way that somehow matched planetary warnings she mentioned. She explained each occurrence as if it were all part of the alignment, and I found myself nodding, telling myself it was harmless superstition, but deep down, my nerves were fraying. She led me to a bench near a fountain, the water reflecting the moon. She continued talking about planetary influences, about how certain alignments could make accidents happen, how intentions mattered, how timing was everything. And then it escalated. A man jogged past, tripping over the edge of the fountain, dropping his water bottle that rolled right to her feet. A gust of wind blew a flyer into my lap at the exact moment she said Venus was causing miscommunications. Every sound, every movement in the park seemed to follow her words. I started to feel trapped, like the universe had turned into her personal stage. Each strange coincidence felt deliberate, as if the stars themselves were conspiring to reinforce her narrative. She laughed softly at my uneasy glances, telling me it was all part of the night, that the planets were showing me themselves. But the way she said it, the intensity in her eyes, it wasn't playful anymore. We walked back toward the street, and I noticed traffic lights seemed to change in rhythm with her commentary. An ice cream cart tipped over exactly as she said a Mars-related mishap was imminent. My mind couldn't keep up with the rhythm of events, each small accident stacking into an almost unbearable sequence. She seemed unaffected, observing calmly, jotting down notes, pointing out alignments, explaining why it all happened. It was mesmerizing and terrifying. I suggested ending the night, hoping to escape the constant coincidences, but she insisted we continue walking, saying the night was too powerful to ignore. A sudden gust of wind blew my hat across the sidewalk, knocking over a stack of newspapers. She smiled, pointing out how the universe had timed it perfectly with her warning about misaligned planets. My chest tightened. I realized I was no longer laughing, no longer seeing coincidences as random. Everything was being filtered through her perception, and it felt like the world had bent to follow her interpretation. By the time we returned to the cafe near where we started, my nerves were raw. She said she had to check her charts one last time, and I watched as she sketched, plotted, and circled symbols. I looked out the window and noticed a cat knocking over a potted plant, a cyclist swerving, a garbage can tipping, all at intervals matching her notes. I couldn't think logically anymore. The city felt alive, orchestrated by her astrology. I left that night feeling unsteady, replaying the events in my mind. Every small accident, every misplaced object, every coincidental noise had a reason, and it had followed a pattern she controlled through her awareness of the stars. It was exhausting to think about, like the world itself had become a game board, and she knew all the rules. I kept seeing patterns days after, minor mishaps feeling like echoes of that night, reinforcing her influence. The more I tried to rationalize it as coincidence, the more I noticed the subtle ways events around me seemed to align. A friend spilling coffee exactly as Mercury shifted, a streetlight flickering during a meeting just like Saturn would demand. It was relentless. She had opened a doorway to a perception where reality was choreographed according to celestial influence, and I couldn't close it. Even weeks later, when I see a newspaper blown across the street or a random object fall from a balcony, my brain ticks through the constellations, calculating alignments, remembering her explanations, remembering the way the night felt like a living map of planetary influence. It wasn't playful anymore. It was obsessive, precise, and terrifying in its insistence. She had shown me a world I couldn't unsee, a world where coincidence wasn't random, and it followed patterns too exact to ignore. I avoid astrology talk now, avoid anything resembling charts, and yet I can't shake the rhythm of that night, the timing of chaos, and the awareness that reality had subtly shifted. When I walk alone in the city at night, I catch myself scanning the sky, wondering which alignment might be guiding the next small catastrophe, remembering how she had mapped the world in invisible constellations that I couldn't escape. I thought it would be chill. Just coffee, casual conversation, no pressure. She suggested a small cafe tucked into a corner of a quiet street, one of those places with mismatched chairs and a chalkboard menu that looked hand-drawn. It had the kind of low hum that made you think you could talk for hours without anyone caring. I got there a little early, ordered a black coffee, and waited. When she showed up, she smiled in that easy way that makes you relax immediately. She didn't come with a backpack of tarot cards or a notepad full of stars like some of the weird profiles I'd seen before. Just a coat and a scarf and this calm, almost hypnotic look. We started chatting about normal stuff, work, favorite movies, music. She listened, really listened, and it felt natural. Then, halfway through my coffee, she leaned forward and asked me a question that seemed harmless at first. She asked what I would do if I found a wallet on the street full of cash. I laughed, said I'd try to find the owner, maybe turn it in. She frowned, not in a mean way, just sharp, like she expected more. Then she asked me to elaborate, to explain why I would choose that over keeping it. I gave the usual moral reasoning and she nodded slowly. That's when it started. She said the next question was important and that I couldn't leave until I answered honestly. She asked me a scenario about choosing between letting someone die to save a crowd of strangers. I froze, tried to joke about it, and she shook her head, smiling, but her eyes had this intensity like she was measuring my soul. And the cafe felt smaller, the walls closer, and I realized something weird. Other people in the cafe had stopped paying attention to their drinks, stopped talking, like we were in a bubble. The hum of espresso machines seemed distant. I laughed nervously, thinking she was just messing with me, but when I tried to leave the table to go to the restroom, she placed a hand on mine. Not aggressively, not like she was holding me hostage physically, but enough that it made me pause. She said that leaving would be irresponsible until I completed the questions. It felt like a game at first, a twisted party game, but then the air shifted. The smell of coffee seemed too strong, acrid, pressing against my senses, and every shadow in the corner of the cafe stretched unnaturally. The questions got weirder. She asked me about lying to protect someone from an inevitable tragedy. I said I would, thinking that was normal human reasoning. She shook her head again, not with disapproval, but with certainty that my answer was incomplete. She wanted details, consequences, scenarios. Every answer had to satisfy some unspoken standard. And the longer I took, the heavier the air became, almost like the cafe itself was pressing in on me. I noticed small things changing. My cup of coffee started to steam more than it should, spiraling like a miniature storm. The chair across from me creaked as if responding to her questions. The lights flickered in rhythm with her pauses. I couldn't tell if it was coincidence or my imagination stretching. I felt trapped by the logic of her test. It wasn't just about morality. It was about timing, precision, detail. Every hesitation felt like failure. She asked me what I would do if I found myself in a situation where no answer was clearly right, where every choice had someone suffering. I froze, trying to formulate words, and that's when I realized that the couple near the window who had been chatting earlier now stared silently, faces blank, their drinks untouched. A man at the counter froze mid-pour. It was that the world had paused to watch me. The questions got faster, more detailed. She asked what I would do if I could prevent a crime by lying, but that lie would ruin someone else's life. If I hesitated, the lights above buzzed sharply. If I spoke too quickly, the room seemed to shrink slightly, chairs scraping unnaturally against the floor. I tried to focus on logic, but each scenario twisted in ways I couldn't anticipate. She smiled softly, telling me that every wrong answer had consequences, though she didn't specify what. I tried to get up once, suggesting we could finish the questions later, but the cafe didn't respond like normal. The door handle twisted in my hand as if resisting, the bell above it jiggling but not ringing. She calmly said I couldn't leave until I answered properly. Then she asked a scenario about choosing between personal happiness and the well-being of strangers. I stumbled through it trying to give a reasoned answer, and the shadows behind her seemed to stretch across the floor like dark fingers. Each question felt like it had multiple layers. She asked me to imagine not just the direct outcome, but the indirect ripple, how small decisions could escalate into catastrophic chains. I started sweating, my hands shaking as my coffee cooled unnaturally fast. The barista had disappeared, replaced by the distant hum of what sounded like whispers, almost like they were echoing the questions back at me. I wanted to leave to tell her it was too much, but my voice felt caught in my throat. She didn't pressure me overtly. She wasn't yelling, she simply waited, writing symbols on a napkin in a way that felt ritualistic, marking each answer with exacting care. The questions continued for what felt like hours, but my watch said 20 minutes had passed. Each wrong or incomplete answer seemed to work the room, the shadows, even the steam from my coffee curling in unnatural ways. Then came the last scenario. It was impossible. She described a choice that seemed to contradict every moral code, every instinct, and said that my answer now would determine what happened next. I froze, realizing I couldn't win. The walls of the cafe pulsed, the hum of machines sensing to my heartbeat, and she leaned forward, calm, almost tender. I spoke anyway, trying to reason it out, but even as I answered, I felt the room reacting, bending slightly toward her side of the table. When it was done, she smiled, satisfied. I felt my knees weaken, my chest tight. The lights normalized, the shadows retreated, and the barista reappeared as if nothing had happened. Other patrons resumed their conversations, drinks in hand, acting like nothing odd had occurred. She told me I had passed, though I couldn't tell what passing really meant. It was a relief, but my body still trembled. My coffee was stone cold, the table sticky with condensation from cups I couldn't remember ordering. I left the cafe, the door opening easily this time. Outside, the street was normal, warm lamps glowing on wet pavement from earlier rain. Cars moved in their usual rhythm, people walking dogs or talking on phones. Nothing indicated the strange pressure inside, the moral test, the room bending to her will. I walked home slowly, glancing at every stranger, every shadow, wondering which questions had real consequences and which ones had been illusions orchestrated by her. The next day, I avoided that street. The thought of coffee, anywhere, of moral dilemmas posed by strangers, twisted in my mind. I replayed the scenarios, the impossible choices, the weight of answers that felt heavier than reality. Friends asked why I was jumpy, distracted, and I didn't tell them. It was hard to explain. The cafe looked normal in my memories, mundane even, but I remembered the way the air had pressed down, how time had warped, and how a person could hold such control over another through nothing more than questions. I never matched with her again. I deleted the app, changed routines, avoided quiet cafes, and still, sometimes when I think of moral choices, small accidents feel linked, reminders of that pressure. And yet, even with distance, I remember her calm, expectant stare, and the way the room bent around her questions, waiting to punish failure. I learned that day that answers can be a trap, and choices are heavier when the world itself seems to test them.